Hello everyone, my name is Lowell Cormier. I'm sitting here courtside at Breton Education Centre, home of the famous Waterford Coal Bowl Classic, and where our future generation of basketball players are filling the hoop. Speaking about filling the hoop, we're doing a documentary on the history of Central High School basketball. It's an amazing history from a tiny school in a small town of New Waterford. Over a 10-year period, they won 6 provincial basketball titles and 1 Canadian juvenile title. No small accomplishment for a school which often, or most times, had less than 120 students. We've done some interviews off-site to accommodate the various locations where people live. So Adam McLean, who is producing this documentary, did some of those videos. How'd they go, Adam?
They went great. I had the pleasure to speak with Richie Spears, George Hughes, and Donnie MacAulay. They all welcomed me into their homes. Had a great chat about their careers at Central, university careers, and even beyond. So we got lots of great stories there, and we're going to hear some of them today in this documentary. Also wanted to thank you, Lowell, for taking time to build this documentary, do the research, and I'm happy to be along for the ride. Well,
I'm really glad you are. You're more than along for the ride. You're integral to this whole process. Even the remote interviews away from the site. And so I think this is going to be, I can't wait to interview Dave MacDonald today. And I think this is going to be something that will be a nice keepsake for certainly the people from Central, but for people of New Waterford who celebrate our tremendous sports heritage.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Adam. It's my privilege to welcome Dave MacDonald to the set, I guess. This is what we call a set. But Dave, it's really good to have you here. Actually, you've been an inspiration for me. I've counted on you for a lot of information on this project. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Lowell. It's a pleasure to be here. And I hope I can give you the information you've been looking for. And hopefully it'll all work out.
Oh, I think it will. We've got some good technical minds behind this this documentary, so I think it's fine. I think the key for me, Dave, and probably for yourself, is to get the word out. What a force Central High School was in sports, for sure, basketball particularly, but also Central, it seemed to me from going back and researching this through the basketball lens, is that it seems that the Central model was set up for trying to achieve excellence. It seems to me there must have been a tremendous culture in the school.
Yeah, well, that's true, and it all started with the principal, Victor Fisher. Victor was, of course, the principal, as I said, and he promoted the students as achieving not so much success as being good human beings, being good representatives of school, town, yourself, and that was his central theme, if you like. We used to have an assembly every morning at 9 o'clock in the gym, and invariably Victor would want to say a few words at the end, and of course the longer he went on, the better we liked it, because it kept us at the first class all that much longer. But that was his main theme, and I think the whole school kind of took the guidance and that lead from him. There were other teachers, of course, and they were all respected, and as you would usually find, kids had their favorites. But I think it all flowed down from Victor Fisher, and so we strove to be good character, and I don't know how many of us actually achieved it, but that was the objective, and you knew that's what he wanted to do, and he was a guy you had to respect. He was not a no-nonsense guy in a strict sense, except that he was a no-nonsense guy in the form of his expectation for you, and I think it influenced an awful lot of us. Don't forget, Central was basically just a T. It was sort of a square building with 2 classrooms on either side of the hall, And then at the end of the hall, there was the office, the teacher's room, if you like, and the gym, which was as a T. And kids maybe 120, on average.
Yeah, it was a really, when I say tiny school, it was tiny.
Absolutely,
So that's grade 9 to 12. At
Grade 9 to
times.
12, yeah.
And so you less than 130 most all the time, right?
I think in my years there, I think the highest enrollment we had in high school was 135.
Really?
And that was the highest. There were years when it was maybe 120, maybe even in the 100-teens kind of thing.
So you're developing basketball teams, like provincial championship basketball teams, Canadian championship basketball teams, with a student population of less than 130. Half of them would be probably girls.
Probably more than half.
Yeah.
I think maybe there was maybe 60 boys in the whole high school.
Amazing. And so that I think I was thinking about this as I was doing some research. That's why some of you guys were on the teams when you were in grade 8 and grade 9.
Yeah, the same guys played everything. I mean, we played every sport. If you look at some of the high school pictures, you will see it's the same guys who were playing soccer, volleyball, basketball, whatever. I started in grade 8, and Ronnie McGibbon also started in grade 8. He didn't play much. He rode the bench a lot.
You got some meaningful minutes in grade 8?
I started.
Wow.
I was a starter. As a matter of fact, I was thinking of this the other day. In my entire basketball career, when I played organized basketball, which I did for 9 years, and by organized I mean either a league or teams that had an ultimate goal, provincial championship or Canadian championship. I played for 9 years in that kind of setting. I went to the final game 7 times, and I was with the winning team 5 times.
Amazing.
In grade 8, as I said, I started. There's a little asterisk there because another guy by the name of Jackie Harper, who was older than me, he was in grade 11. He and I split the starting duties before Christmas. Red Bob would put him in one game and me starting the next game. But after Christmas, Jackie, fortunately for me, joined the Navy, so I was a starter. And Lowell, from that point through the rest of my career, I always started. I never rode the bench.
That's amazing. And you guys, like tiny school.
Yeah.
And the kicker is the tiny gym.
Yeah.
Small gym.
Yeah. We used to think it was an advantage if another team had to come in that we had an advantage, but nobody had an advantage in that school. It was just a small gym kind of thing, and I don't think we went anywhere where we were playing in a similar type of setting, being that small kind of thing.
Yeah, like I played in it, and I remember it being very awkward, very small. It's like you didn't have a lot of room to maneuver.
No, and so a lot of the meaningful games we played at Mount Carmel.
Okay. The high schools were constructed around the same time, weren't they?
Yeah, in the mid '50s.
Yes.
But the difference for Central. Central didn't have a school with a gym or anything like that. In 1950, they built Calvin Church Hall, and it had a gymnasium. Not very big, but big enough.
The history of Calvin Hall and Central basketball is so intertwined,
It wouldn't have happened without Calvin Church Hall. A friend of mine was just telling me that he remembers in those days that Central and Mount Carmel playing, and Mount Carmel were the dominant team, and Central were the doormats, and then they built Calvin Church Hall, and Red Bob started organizing the kids in a church league, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, well, I know even when I was playing, I would purposely hang around with Jimmy Pasher and Roy Hughes.
Oh, yeah.
So I could get in the Calvin Hall with those guys. They seem to have an unlimited amount of time in there, right?
Yeah.
As you know, growing up, you always wanted to get in the gym, right?
Sure.
You always wanted to get in the gym. And that's where you really develop your skills, right? And it's
sure.
It's not just playing under coaching. It's working on your own and developing your game. That's where you really,
We
as
should
you
ex-
well know, that's where you thrive.
And I mean, we should explain probably that this is before television and computers and cell phones, and so getting into the gym was pretty important. And at Central, you could do it pretty easily. I mean, they were pretty generous with gym time.
That's amazing. And the way there's no TV, okay. And so if you wanted to learn, you either you took instruction from your coach, or you read a book, or I think in my day, and I know certainly in your day, it was the influence of the older players in the community, like the Strands and that maybe you guys, did you guys fall into that?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you've heard it said, I'm sure, that you know, teams and players stand on the shoulders of those who came before, and I think it's a truism that certainly in terms of Central's character of teams and will to win, we got it. I know I did, and I'm sure George Hughes and everybody who else came behind me looked at the guys who played in front of us. And there were some very good ones, not only the Central guys like the Saxons and the McGibbons and the Wilsons, but guys like Carl Marsh and Mike Roberts, who came down from Mount Carmel and played for Central. And they were always good teams, and they had some pretty good battles. But the first game of basketball, Lowell, that I ever saw was in Calvin Church Hall, and I couldn't even get in the gym. I had to stand at the back of the crowd looking through the door. And Mount Carmel were playing Central, and it was a real battle. And I could almost see the sweat flying off the guys. So I thought, I want to do that. But yeah, we learned a lot and we saw a lot from about the game of basketball and how to play it from the guys that went before, and their success was a big influence on what we wanted to do. We wanted that.
You modeled your game after
exactly. We wanted to have that kind of success.
It's interesting. Carl Marsh and Mike Roberts came down to Central from Mount Carmel, so. That was the grade 12 year. What's the story on that? Yeah,
well, back in that day, there were 3 schools in New Waterford and 1 in New Victoria. And Central was the only school that offered a grade 12 year.
Amazing.
So if any of the kids wanted to go for whatever reason, whether it was a university credit or to get into a nursing or for whatever reason, and they needed or wanted grade 12, they had to come to Central. They did come to Central. So Central, you know, had the benefit of getting a lot of kids from the other schools. And in the case of sports, sometimes they got the best players from other schools.
Yes.
And that would be the case for Carl Marsh and Mike Roberts.
Oh, you got 2 dandies there.
We got 2 dandies there, and they won with that year they come down. They won a provincial championship. And
yeah,
I'm
53, 54.
Exactly, and I'm sure Carl Marsh and Mike Roberts had a lot to do with it.
Oh, I could imagine, and they went on to star with the we'll call the modern Strands. It was a group formed by Carl and Russell McNeil in the late 50s. You know, we all know about the original Strands that won a Canadian title in 46, 47. But these guys formed the modern Strands, and they won 16 titles.
Fantastic.
Yeah, between counting Maritime and Nova Scotia. I think it was 9 Nova Scotia and 7 Maritime. So you guys as a group, I'm finding out, played against them and used them as competition as you advanced, did you?
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I think that the modern version of the Strands, if we can call them that, may have started in the late 50s when we were just coming through high school. And we played them a lot. Red Bob made sure we played the Strands as much as they would let us. And
it's brilliant when you think of it.
It was brilliant, and Red Bob had 2 great characteristics as a coach. One, he let us in the gym almost any time, and I mean, when school got canceled because of storms or something, And well, we'd be on the phone to Red Bob saying, "Sir, can you open the gym?" We'd like, "Oh, sure, okay, I'll go down." And he lived fairly close, and he'd open it up and he'd throw the basketballs out and let us in for until supper time or later.
And you thought you were in heaven.
Exactly, and so he gave us a lot of playing time. And my memory is, he never said no. I don't think he ever said no when we wanted to go in the gym if there was nothing going on, and usually there was nothing going on.
Yes.
And so that was a great asset, and played. The other part of his great coaching was, we didn't spend a whole lot of time doing layups and drills and this sort of thing. We played. There were scrimmage after scrimmage. So between that and playing the strands,
yes,
all the time. I mean, there would have been no juvenile championship without the Waterford Strands.
Okay, they brought you up to that. Playing them brought you up to another level.
They brought us up to the level that we eventually got to. I mean, when we started out, there was no way we could touch them in terms of winning. But when we wound up, we could win the odd game, and sometimes we win a few games in a row.
Which is quite a feat. So it just goes to show you that you guys had the talent, and Red Bob getting you the extra competition.
Exactly. And we learned, I mean, I don't want to say we learned everything, but my memory is we learned an awful lot from playing the strands. I mean, not individual things, you know, drills and how to play and how to cut and how to block and, you know, the pick and roll or the give and go, and because they were a run and shoot team.
And they're loaded with talent.
Loaded with talent.
University players, Russell McNeil and Carl Marsh, stars.
McNeil, and Carl both played, and I think Mike as well, didn't he?
Yeah, and then they had other guys like Bozo Steele and those guys, great athletes. Spikey McKinnon,
Spike McKinnon, and Smoody Burns.
Yeah, Smoody was a dandy. I heard he was outstanding.
There was a guy too from 16, Lex MacDonald.
Oh, I heard Carl talk about him a lot.
Lex MacDonald was outstanding.
Yes, I heard Carl.
I don't know what his background was. I think he played at St. Agnes before my time, but he was outstanding.
Yeah, so that was quite a treat for you guys at 16 and 17 and 8 years old, playing against probably your idols, right?
Oh, definitely. And I'm sure if you talk to Donnie and George, they'll tell you that.
Same thing.
They picked up lots from, and as I said, without the Waterford Strands playing us all the time and teaching us, how does that saying goes? Teaching us by their action, not telling us what to do or anything.
Exactly.
Because some of those games were pretty competitive. Yeah.
And I bet you they took great delight in how you guys were doing.
I'm sure they did. Without them, I mean, we wouldn't have nearly achieved what we did. And I'd like to think that we helped them too at the time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. You know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. They're trying to keep up with the young ladies.
Yeah. Not going to let those young guys.
Those guys would be exactly. Advancing in their careers.
Yeah, exactly.
I got my start at when I was around 12 years old at Calvin United Church. There was just a United Church basketball league that we played on Saturdays, and we went to the United Churches in Sydney River, and Glace Bay. And the nucleus of what would become the central team in the late 50s were the Protestants on that team, I guess. But so we played for 3 years, and were quite successful, and that was the start, I guess. And then I eventually got to Central in 57, 58. That would have been the first year. And 4 of us from that team were in grade 9 and became part of the Central team right then, and stayed together for the next 4 years. So it was
Okay, I went to Central School from the time when I was in grade primary until I graduated from high school, and because Central School was so involved in basketball, and New Waterford at that time did not have a rink or anything, so soccer by the Brits that were running our coal mines, and basketball and so on were big games because we didn't have a rink, and so everybody played, and we all became friends. We all played against one another, and I caught on. That was the strength. It was one of my things that I really wanted to get better at.
My father was the commanding officer of the RCAF Air Cadets in Waterford, Squadron 293. He'd be proud that I remembered. And they had a recreational basketball program. And there was a basketball in our house, a leather basketball, and I used to bounce it around and everything. I would have been 12-ish at the time. So the next thing that happened in basketball for me was Calvin United Church had a house league in Calvin Hall, and they signed people up. They drafted teams, tried to make them even, and that was run by a guy named Harrison of Harrison Bookstore on Plummer Avenue. Carl Harrison was his name. I used to work a little bit delivering papers for him, and so that was I got started, and then I got kind of hooked. Now it gets a little heavy here. In those years, I was not a happy kid because I had a speech impediment. I stuttered, and it was very, very painful. And plus, my neighborhood, the kids were 2 years older than me. Lauren Fisher, Wayne McGibbon, all those guys that were 2 years up on me. And there was hardly anybody of my age exactly. So I was kind of on the outside. So I found refuge in the gym. And I mean, the speech impediment was so pronounced that I was afraid to talk on the telephone. Just afraid that the telephone was a bad thing. So that spilled over into school. I was a decent student. I got to high school. I made the team in grade 9, and that's when the guys from Mount Carmel were there, who I admired very much, plus some of the older guys in my neighborhood. So I was kind of end of the bench. So in that era, Mount Carmel High School, St. Agnes High School, and Central School were constructed, physically constructed. They were built, and all of them had gyms, and it was really, really a blessing. Still no rink in Waterford, and so the rivalry was pretty intense, and they played rugby for a while, but that got to be too knock 'em down, drag 'em out things. So they went to soccer. So I went through the program at Central High School. The coach was Robert MacDonald, Red Bob. Red Bob was a guy, pretty dedicated guy.
To me, he always seemed more like a facilitator, in the sense that I could always get in the gym, whether it was before class or after school, and we could all go stay there for a couple of hours. He lived in Sydney, but he would stick around, put the balls out, and he'd be marking papers or preparing lessons, and just gave us the opportunity to practice. So we did a lot of things on our own, with scrimmage against each other, which was, but I think primarily because we had the opportunity to spend hours in there, with him to stay away from home, or he wouldn't be leaving to go back to Sydney until 6 o'clock at night or sometimes, so I think that was a primary impact for me anyway, just providing the opportunity for us to play.
And we had Red Bob MacDonald was our coach, and a great science teacher, but also a great coach. He really taught us the fundamentals, and made sure that we're in the gym a long time. So we were working on the fundamentals and the plays that made you a good team. Who goes where and that sort of thing, and that taught us a lot.
I've heard a lot about Red Bob, but
yes, And Red Bob was in the Waterford, and then when most of us were gone, he went to Sydney Academy, where he coached the Sydney Academy team and produced some very good ball players. And then, towards the end of his career, he went up to Englishtown, where he lived, had his house right there, but was also the coach in Bedeck, in the Bedeck Royal High School. Yeah, amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, and a great person.
Red Bob was the whole energy of it. He's the guy that he was a science teacher. He was well educated guy. This was a big part of his life, I think. I think it was. He went to Bedeck and taught there, and all of a sudden there was a team in Bedeck coming out, you know, stuff like that. So this is what basketball. This is how the game grows. It takes someone that's interested and dedicated to it, and it's not work at all. It's just a natural progression. So he was good. He cared for his players, and he was pretty competitive too. He doesn't. People don't look at him like that, but he wanted to beat people. I know. He wanted to beat them on their floor. That was kind of, we want to beat them on their floor. That was the extent of his, pep talks and everything. But yeah, no question, he's a singular. If you had to, come down to it, he was the guy that started it all and continued to do it for over the years.
At that time, and well, your grandmother would know, I guess, but there were 3 high schools, so St. Agnes up St. Agnes Way, Mount Carmel, and Central was in the middle of town, but that was primarily Protestant, and we were the only school that had a grade 12, so Mount Carmelites and St. Agnes who wanted to come get grade 12, some went to junior college in Sydney, but those who wanted to come to get a grade 12 came to Central. And I always jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, said we used to allow a couple of Catholics on the team every year so they get a chance to win something. And when I think back now, I was thinking that this morning, that I would not say this too loud, but that the Catholics probably were an integral part of our teams back then. Gregor McPherson, John Gillis, Delphin Muse, later on Simon Chesson, Hector Roach, Chicky DeVoe. They all were. Frank McKenzie was another one.
But the strength of our basketball, which was my main sport that I played everything else, but basketball was the one, was the fact that St. Agnes and Mount Carmel went as far as grade 11, where we had grade 12. So many of their athletes who wanted to play sports at St. Vex or Dalhousie or go on even further, they came down to play another year, which made us much stronger. And that's why we were so strong throughout the province.
Carl Marsh, Mike Roberts. Now, Dave MacDonald was on it. We were on it together for a year, maybe 2. I can't remember. I really can't remember. But he and MacAulay and those guys and Hughes, they came later. So they're the ones that had the big success as a team there, because they played in the basketball. The Canadian Amateur Basketball Association had divisions, senior, junior, juvenile, stuff like that. So they won a title then.
Calvin Hall was very important. That was, Calvin Hall's a part of the United Church, Calvin United, and it was open. Richie Spears lived across the road, and Richie Spears would break in and practice every time the gym was closed. But that was open to us, and we spent a lot of time developing our skills and playing at Calvin.
Calvin Hall is still there. It was sold to a recreational gym thing. It has an upstairs and a downstairs. Upstairs there's classrooms and a balcony that looks over onto the gym. I guess it's still there, yeah. So Sunday school, I had to go to Sunday school because they wouldn't let me in. I remember the minister talking to my parents. He says, if he wants to have use of the hall, he needs to go to Sunday school. So I remember some of the biggest laughs I've had in my life was in those classes. I mean, I must have been hard on the teachers because I remember I couldn't stop laughing. Oh, I don't know what was wrong, but I just was laughing all the time. So what I did was unlock the window, and I got a ladder. Now we're talking the middle of the night here, okay? I carry the ladder over to Calvin Hall, put it against the wall outside. I climb up, I get the window open, and then pull the ladder up, bring the ladder over to the balcony, put the ladder down, climb down, and then leave, and of course bar the door when I leave, bring the ladder back, pick up my basketball, dribble it over, go in and shoot in the dark. There was enough lights from Plummer Avenue. We had street light in those days. We did have street lights, and there was big windows there, so it was good. And I'd spend as much time as I felt like there, and it was just hour after hour.
I guess now you would call it breaking in, but I think we called it sneaking in. We were able to sneak into Calvin Hall, and because I was a little taller, if Richie didn't have his ladder, then they could boost me up, and I could get in the side window. And nobody could see there because the buildings in front were blocking it, and the minister's residence was a little down a little bit. So I could get in, open the door, and let them in. And then because I was taller, I went upstairs, and you could hang over a balcony and drop into the gym. So I only had to drop maybe 5 feet by the time I was hanging down. Then we let everybody in. Maybe there'd only be 6 of us or whatever, or 8. And we could turn the lights on because the curtains were closed, so nobody would even know we were in there. And we'd be there 2 or 3 hours, and then they'd slip their way out, and I would lock the doors, and then there was another window around the front. I guess that was Smith Street maybe, and I could drop out there. So we did that periodically, which was, and I guess I say it was probably break and enter what we were doing, but we felt we were just being boys and having some fun. So we didn't do any damage or anything. It didn't hurt anything. So that's how Calvin Hall became an integral part of our ability, I guess, because we could always get in there and play.
At Simon Cheson's funeral, I spoke about the war we had with janitors. The janitor at Central didn't want the floor to get dirty, so he didn't want you coming in. So I mean, there was a couple of times there was some punches thrown by a guy. I knew he was serious about it because he'd be close enough that I could smell his breath, and he got me here with one, and then he wanted the basketball, but I'd passed it to Simon Cheson, and he's holding the basketball. And now the janitor's coming at him. He's passing it to me. We're going 2-on-1, and he can't get the basketball. So that's one of the stories that's actually happened. Yeah, that was a time. Oh, that was a time. There was New Year's Day. I remember when at the funeral I said it was a snowy day in Waterford, and when the phone rang, it was Simon. We used to tell, okay, let's find a gym. We're going to see Frank Angle. Frank Angle was a supervisor of schools. He wouldn't mind giving you the keys to Mount Carmel. And of course, the side doors didn't always open or close correctly. The push things, sometimes you could get in there without going through the main thing. But so anyway, but Frank Ango was not there at the time when we knocked on the door. So I remember the snow, we were going through the door. And anyway, no Frank Ango visiting somewhere, Christmas, no, New Year's. So let's go to the Strand. We went in the Strand, and there were nothing but tables all over the place. It was card. There had been a bingo game and something the night before, and it was freezing cold. So that's okay. Let's go find something. So when we went to Calvin Hall, I started to do that, and I looked at Simon. I said, "What do you think?" He says, "No, they'll know who did it." So we didn't break the window. We went back to the Strand, cleaned it up, put the chairs away, swept the floor, and we had. I tell you what, when we were there, Simon and I were there. We were shooting the basketball, but the net was tight. The net grabbed the basketball. You know, it was just don't know what. It was like not used or something, but it grabbed the basketball. So we're shooting with gloves, and we keep a table right there because one of us got to go up when the ball goes in the hoop. We got to get the ball. So we were doing something that was sophisticated because coaches often said wear gloves so you can improve your ball handling, you know, tactical. And we were pulling a basketball out of the thing, which is like going back to 1896 or whatever it was. So it was cold. So that.
So Dave, the first championship basketball team out of Central, to my knowledge, is the 1952-53 championship squad. And the players on that were Lloyd Lewis, Doug Cook, Russ Wilson, Vic Saxon, Tommy Light, Hugh Forsyth, Harvey Gregor, Dee Dee Sharp, Rolly Saxon, Alf Matheson, and of course the coach was Red Bob. So that may have been the first squad that he coached, I'm not sure. And talking to Alfie Matheson about this, there were only 2 grade 11s on that team and they won a provincial title, so that's quite a feat, really, eh?
Yeah, I didn't see those guys. They were a little too far ahead of my time. I didn't see them as a team play, but I knew a lot of those guys as the years went by and as I grew up. And they would have been on the banner when I mentioned earlier about walking down the hall in Central School and being inspired by the banners, and their names would have been on it.
Might have been the first banner that you would have
probably
had them in order.
Yes, exactly.
And but only 2 grade 11s. They beat Mount Carmel in a 2-game total point. They lost the first game at Mount Carmel by 2 points, but then they went to Central Gym for the home court advantage, the smaller gym, and they ended up winning by, I think, 3 points, and they were able to control Carl and Smoothie in the Smoothie Burns, Carl Marsh and Smoothie Burns in the smaller gym. Right. So that's what Alfie attributes that victory to. I think Carl and Smoothie were younger players at that time, right?
Yeah.
And then they went on to beat St. Anne's from Glace Bay, which was usually a powerhouse, 43-42. They played Sydney Academy, which I found interesting in that day, and they played them and beat them in the YMCA. They lost by 2 points, but then they pounded them, as Alfie said, 51-31 at Central, home court advantage again. And this team was honored in Call Ball, one of the first Central teams, other than the Juvenile team, to be honored during Call Ball 1989. Right. They advanced to the provincials in Antigonish, and they beat QEH there 33-23. Notice the low scores, eh?
Yes, yeah.
Probably shooting with 2 hands.
Wouldn't have been many jump shots taken in those
quarters. A different game altogether. And then they beat Digby 47-40, but lost the next game to Clark's Harbour and won the deciding game against Lockport 51-39. And so they won that first title, and they're the guys that set the stage for the exploits that followed.
Yeah, I'm sure of it. And if that's, as you say, that one of the first teams to win a championship from Central, It wasn't the last, of course, but again, they would have been that would have been a result of them. All those guys, of course, would have learned to play basketball in the Calvin Church Hall.
Okay, right.
And and by the sounds of it, the gym made a big difference because it was, as we said earlier, a very small gym, and there wasn't another one in that size that anybody could get used to playing in. You couldn't practice playing in a small gym if there wasn't no small gym. So it probably was a big advantage.
Oh, I would think so. And it brings back where I'm digressing here, but it brings back from my general knowledge of basketball, that we had a Cape Breton championship team that played out of Calvin Hall. Jimmy Kavanaugh's father, Jim Kavanagh Sr., was on that team, and they were called the Nivlacs, and that was Calvin spelt backwards.
Yeah, my father played on that team.
Really?
Yeah, and we had pictures, Lowell. I remember pictures up on going up the stairs where we lived in Ling Street. He had several pictures there of old teams that he played with. Rugby and basketball with the Nivlacs.
So your father's a good athlete too, then?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's in the genes.
I think so.
Hell yeah, for sure. The next team I have, Dave, and I don't have any information. We're hoping that we can scour up a 54 or 55 yearbook, but that's when Mike and Carl came down.
Ah, yes, yeah.
And they went on to win the provincial championship, but we don't have any information.
Do you have the players?
No, we don't have the players.
Okay.
But before we publish this documentary, we're going to try and secure a yearbook. I think we'll be able to get a yearbook, and we'll be able to put a storyboard up on it, right?
Okay.
But that would be Mike and Carl when they're in their grade 12 year, and they would have led the team.
I'm sure they would have
done
a great team.
And it was probably, I wouldn't doubt it to be against Lockport or Oxford or Bridgetown, because they seem to be the guys you were playing quite a bit in your division, eh?
Yeah, Lockport seemed to me were always there. Lockport, and then depending on, could have been Tattamagush in our day or Bridgetown.
Yes.
But Lockport was generally somewhere to be played in the finals or semifinals, and they had a great team.
When you mention Lockport, I see their name all littered through all the years that I covered doing this.
Right.
And I keep hearing reference to Dick Hayden. Yeah. So you played against Dick Hayden.
Well, yeah. When I played for Central my first year when I was grade 8, and we went to the provincial championship, and we were playing against Lockport in Lockport. It was a 2-game total point, and they had Dick Hayden was their big gun. Now they had a relatively small gym too. I don't know if it. Now that I think of it, it probably wasn't much bigger than our gym. Mm-hmm. And Dick Hayden could shoot the ball from center court.
Really?
And make it most of the time. We didn't believe that Dick Hayden was going to be consistently able to make the ball from center court, so we weren't picking him up until he got over center court, yes. Right? But Dick Hayden didn't have to get over center court, and he consistently put them in. He killed us, really. I think it was a 2-game total point. I think we lost the first game by 10 points and the second game by 2 points. But Dick Hayden was the guy.
He's really good then.
He was really good.
So did you run into him again?
I did run into him. I ran into him playing golf one time in the men's senior day in Truro. Mm-hmm. And you put your name in, and you got to play golf with whoever they put you with. And so one day I get with these guys, and guy introduces himself as one of my foursome, and he says, "My name is Richard Hayden." And I said to him, he was taller than I remembered. I said, "Would you be the Dick Hayden that played basketball for Lockport?" Yeah. He said, "Yeah, well, yeah, I am." So I told him who I was, and he remembered, of course, and because we had played, he and I had played together in later years for the Schooners at Senior B and won a Canadian title together. Yeah,
so he was. Oh, he became a teammate.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
He became a teammate of mine years ago. But and anyway, he had just had a throat operation and he wasn't supposed to talk. But he gabbed the whole way around. He wouldn't stop talking.
Oh, that's awesome. You guys reminiscing about everything.
We had a great time.
That's a great.
But he was a great player. Dick Hayden, absolutely fantastic.
He went on to Mount A. He played at Mount A.
Yeah, he played for Mount A, and then he got. I think he was in the Nova Scotia headmasters or Nova Scotia Department of Education athletic department with Ruck.
Oh yeah, because I think him and Russell were good friends.
And they were workmates too. I think they were both.
I heard the name Dick Hayden in reference to basketball, but as a youngster or younger, never thought anything of it. Right.
Yeah.
And now I'm really intrigued with how these names become more real to me by just
it's amazing.
looking at some of their exploits.
I got a great story I have to tell you about Dick Hayden. He during our round of golf, we got discussing, you're married, your family. Oh yeah, he said, I got 3 kids. He said, they're all grown up now. He said, 2 boys and a girl. And I said, did any of them play sports? Oh, they all played sports. He said, the 2 boys, it was always a competition about who was the best basketball player. And I said, and who was the best basketball player? He said, my daughter.
There you go.
There you go. So
there you go.
Yeah, she was a winner.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, Dave. We talked about Dick Hayden and how he really took charge and basically won that series for Lockport. You're very young then. You're in grade 8.
Grade 8. Getting
used to that kind of a competition. And the members of the team that year were Butch Wilson, Wayne McGibbon, Paul Jansen, Wes Thorne, Newton Darrow, Ron McGibbon, Dave MacDonald, and Richie Spears. Any of those names ring a bell with you these days, other than Richie? We'll talk about Richie later.
Yeah. Well, I remember them all, of course, but when I was in grade 8 and I went over to try out for the high school team, and I remember the very first practice, Red Bob handed me a basketball and taught me how to pivot with the ball. And he said, here, stand in this corner and practice your pivoting until I come and get you. And then he went scrimmage with the rest of the team. Lowell, I must have been standing in the corner half an hour, 3/4 of an hour.
Working on your pivots.
Just working on the pivoting. Yeah. But I could pivot for the rest of my career. I was able to pivot without worrying about somebody getting the ball off me. But sure, those guys, in terms of Wayne McGibbon, Butch Wilson, I would say Wayne McGibbon taught me how to play the game because we both seemed to be forwards and ball hawks and quick turnover. So he taught me the game, the central game, if you will. And Butch Wilson just seemed to have a knack for knowing what to do when it needed to be done.
Oh, nice.
And he was a guy who somehow or other, no matter if the game seemed to be getting away from us or ever, Butch Wilson knew what to do so we would win. So as I've often said, Wayne McGibbon taught me how to play, and Butch Wilson taught me how to win.
Oh, what a nice compliment for those guys.
True.
Yeah. But as a youngster, as a grade 8, you're looking up to those guys.
Absolutely, there were, because it was both their last year. Butch and Wayne graduated out that year. They were in grade 12, so I was very fortunate.
It's a nice memory.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dave, you came out of a tough series the year before in Lockport, so now you're in 1957-58 season, and once again you advanced to the provincial finals, and I guess you played a tough series against a very good Oxford squad at Mount Carmel Gym. And the members of your team that year were John O'Brien, Jackie McCachran, Gregor McPherson. They were all St. Agnes.
Yes, they all come down from St. Agnes. And then all good players.
Yeah, and then you had Richie Spears and Barry Lewis and Malcolm McGibbon, Ron McGibbon, Ralph Fisher, yourself, and then one Donnie MacAulay makes an appearance on the team. So I can see how this is setting up. So a tough Oxford squad to play against.
They had a very good team, and I don't remember a whole lot about that series except that they a guy on their team whose last name was King. His first name might have been John, but I'm not sure. And the first game he scored something like 24 points, and I remember Red Bob coming to me after that game, because I was guarding him, and he scored 24 points. So I wasn't very popular with Red Bob, but Red Bob came to me and basically said, "I'm going to put you in tomorrow. You're going to be guarding John King again, but if he starts scoring again, then I'm taking you off the floor." He never ever said that to me before or after that my entire career, but he did for that game. So I actually went to Smoody Burns, who's my brother-in-law.
Yeah. Okay.
And said, this is the deal. I have to guard John King, and how am I going to do it? How am I going to do this? And so Smoody started explaining the ins and outs of guarding to me, and basically wound up by saying, "You have to stay with him. You have to stay on him at all times. Wherever he goes, you go. If he goes to the bathroom, you go with him." so anyway, I took that to heart, and John King got 4 points the second game. So
yeah, but because of their first good game, the first game,
yeah.
the two game total points, a tough series.
Two game total points.
Have a bad game, and then
and I don't think we ever got. I mean, we weren't clobbered, but we were they were definitely the better team.
I wonder if this John King there was a John King that came in from Halifax to play with a few Halifax senior teams, and eventually joined the Strands. And I wouldn't doubt it. This is the same John King. He was about 6 feet, well built. Guy that was always on the floor burns, played something like Bozo Steele, but really skilled.
Yeah, it sounds like him. He was a very good player and tough player, played tough. So
sounds like
could have been the same guy.
Yeah, so Dave, in 1958-59, you guys were starting to, you have 2 years previous in the finals, and now I think the team was ready to go and win some championships. And the members of that team, 58-59, were Lloyd McGibbon, Frank Kaplan, Norman McLean, Harold Cook, Ron McGibbon, Ralph Fisher, and John Gillis, who used to coach me, and Delphin Muse, 2 transfers from St. Agnes. And that year, you guys were picked to finish second by the pundits. I think the pundits favored Mount Carmel.
Yes, well, through the season, Mount Carmel had beat us. I don't think we beat them at all through the season. There were certain, not a whole lot of games, but 4 or 5 times maybe. Yes. We wound up playing Mount Carmel, and they beat us. They beat us in Mount Carmel, and they beat us at Central.
Really?
So when the playoffs came, it seemed most likely that Mount Carmel were going to win, and it was a 2-game total point, and the first game was going to be played at Central, and the second game would be played at Mount Carmel.
Okay.
Rumor was that Mount Carmel were pretty well ready to win and go, and had even packed their bags.
Oh, okay.
That was the rumor that we were told, so you can imagine how we reacted to that. So anyway, they came down to Central for the first game, and we wound up beating them by 4 points.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this works out or not, or it might have been 3, but anyway, then we went up to Mount Carmel, and everybody felt that, oh well, it's going to be, you're not going to be in Central Gym anymore and have that advantage. Mm-hmm. So Mount Carmel, I think they still had their bags packed.
Yeah.
And we beat them at Mount Carmel by 1 point. So
yeah, that makes sense, because the 2-game total point was 91-87.
Yeah, 4 points.
So
so
it
might have been 3 the first time.
So
we were elated, of course, and they were devastated. I mean, I know these guys now, and I've known them all my life since Sweeney and
Jimmy
and Jimmy Kavanagh and Hector Roach, of course.
Okay, Hector
and Pat Lorad, good players.
Yes,
I mean, Simon had to be in there somewhere.
Yeah, younger. Yes.
Yeah, and they were a good team. But we were able to pull off win the series, and we went all the way after that.
Well, it's a funny thing you say that, because they were a good team, And if you look at how you advanced and the scores, when I was growing up, what they would say, the adults would say, whoever wins from New Waterford, comes out of the Waterford between St. Agnes, Central, and Mount Carmel, pretty well has got a shot at the
Going to go
provincials.
deep into the playoffs. And that was the feeling. Everybody knew that. You had to get out of New Waterford. But of course, to get out of New Waterford, you had to go through Mount Carmel.
Yeah, yeah, and so I know Sweeney Hinchy is, I think he's still devastated that you guys beat them that year. And then he tells me Ruck was not happy. He's not happy, and I don't think Ruck coached again at basketball at Mount Carmel. I'm not saying it was because of this, but I think that was his last foray into high school basketball. As you know, he went on to. He moved and went to. He didn't coach when I was there, and I came 4 or 5 years later. So he moved on to the provincial Department of Education. But anyhow, you guys, you advanced to Antigonish, you beat Antigonish in Oxford. Then you ran into a rugged Bridgetown team.
Really tough. I can't remember a whole lot about that particular series, but I remember it was probably one of the most brutal series that I was ever a part of. Until I played in Toronto one time. That's another story. But in terms of the high school, it was probably the most brutal series we were ever in. We were all black and blue, and as Donnie, I think it was, said that everybody could see the whacking and fouling going on except the referees. So
Yeah.
once we knew that they weren't going to call anything, it got pretty brutal. But anyway, we wound up.
Brutal both ways, though, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You guys rose to the occasion.
Oh yeah, no, we didn't mind brutal.
Yeah, no.
We were a small team, so we kind of had to be brutal at times.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of hand checking and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one thing we always knew about basketball was that the referees usually only called a foul on one guy. So we kind of had it was kind of an unspoken rule that if somebody came through the key and tried to get a layup, everybody whacked him.
Yes.
Because everybody close to him whacked him because
there's only one call.
There was only one call.
So you invented help defense.
Yeah, exactly.
You won that series by a score of 98-78. So you did really good. You won by 20 points, 2 game 12 points.
Yeah.
Would Howard Jackson have been on that team? Remember that name?
I don't remember that.
Bridgetown had some dandy athletes.
I don't remember anybody.
They were. I wouldn't doubt he was on that team. Bridgetown were a force, especially maybe from this point on, and they were also a force in track and field.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't doubt Howard Jackson was on that team. He was a tremendous track and field guy, and these guys were all, like yourselves, multi-sport athletes, right?
Right.
In small town, and they worked hard at their game. So, Dave, something that I noticed that you wrote, and I really took notice of it, was that you had your own cheering crowd wherever you went, and they followed you all through provincials, and you called them the Gallivanting Six, and Don McVicker, who was a phys ed instructor, took these people to your road games.
Yes, that was a name they gave themselves, by the way.
Okay.
And Don McVicker provided the car and the driving, and they followed us right through our trip in the provincial playdowns. And we just went. If we won, we kept going. We didn't come back home and go again.
Oh.
It was one straight trip. If we won in Antigonish, you kept going on to wherever. That's the way it was set up.
Oh.
And so, who did we play? We played Antigonish.
And then I think you played Antigonish, and then you went on to play Oxford. And then you ended up in Bridgetown.
Yeah, well, they came with us to Antigonish and Oxford, and went on to Bridgetown. And it was great having them, Lowell, because we're going into a strange town, strange gym. And the crowd was, of course, against us. But we had this group of students and Don McVicker from Central who were there cheering us on. They did a lot of screaming. They did it pretty good. So it was a big help, as you can imagine. Oh my God,
I can't imagine. It's like a Hoosier thing, right?
But the last when we won won the right to go to the finals, and we're on our way to. Where was it?
That was in Bridgetown.
Oh yeah, and we're on our way. When we were on our way to Bridgetown, had won then to go right to the finals at Bridgetown. There was a guy in our school by the name of Tom MacQuarrie, who hitchhiked from New Waterford to Bridgetown. And it was pretty well an overnight hitchhiking job that he did to get to Bridgetown, because he wouldn't have had a whole lot of notice. We played, in Oxford and won, and 2 days later we were probably in Bridgetown. And he hitchhiked all the way that night, overnight. He got into the town somewhere early morning of the first game, kind of thing.
My God, that's crazy, isn't it?
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, Tom MacQuarrie.
Tom MacQuarrie.
So he took the initiative to hitchhike to your game in Bridgetown.
To Bridgetown.
That's amazing.
Never told, just, he came. And here's the interesting part about Tom MacQuarrie. He was from St. Agnes. He was just down to Central for grade 12. It wasn't like he was a lifer there, but that will tell you something about the seamless transition of students from other schools and how they took to
100% does it ever, and it didn't take them long to pick up on the school culture, did it?
No, exactly.
And some of those ladies were like Elaine Sharp, Carol McDougall, who was from St. Agnes, transferred from St. Agnes, Marilyn Hillier, Doria McGibbon, and there's another guy, Graham McPherson.
Yeah, he was sent.
Yeah. So that he was with, and Mr. McVicker volunteering to drive them up.
Yeah, exactly.
And he went on to have a great coaching career. The only reason I know that is that when I was at Mount Carmel, his team split a Nova Scotia A soccer championship with us. So we played 2 overtimes, and it was still tied. And at that point, you didn't have to play any more overtime. So we split the title. Bizarre, one of the most bizarre moments I was ever involved in sports, splitting a title. But he went on to have a great coaching career up, and that team was Sidney Stephen, and he went on to coach a lot of probably provincial championship team. He's a well-known name in the provincial coaching and physical education. And he probably just got his started in Central. He probably
I think
probably
that was
young then.
I think that was his first teaching gig.
Yeah, but what a way to wrap up a provincial title on the road. And you got 7 or 8 people there cheering you on.
Yeah, it was incredible.
But one question's bugging me. I hope somebody drove Mr. MacQuarrie home, Tom MacQuarrie home. I hope he didn't. I'm sure somebody would.
I'm sure.
He would have got a ride home.
Yeah, I think they squeezed him into Mr. McVicker's car. But there was no such a thing as a bus. We all went in somebody's car.
Oh no, yeah. So in 1959-60, you're back on the hunt again for another championship, and that was the year the first year, I think, that headmasters went to 4 zone winners. Instead of being on the road east and west, you converged on one host site. And so the members of that team were a good friend of mine, Roger Guillot, Frank Kaplan, Rodney McPherson, Harold Cook, Ron McGibbon, Ralph Fisher, Donnie MacAulay, yours truly, your Dave MacDonald again, Chicky Duvall from Mount Carmel, Frank McKenzie and Gump Wedd from St. Agnes, and I know a few of those guys. And so, Dave, when you went to Lockport, the teams that were congregated there were yourselves, King's Collegiate, Tatamagouche, and Lockport. What do you remember about that series?
It was an interesting experience because it was the first year, as you say, that they had done the zone team, zone reps. So instead of playing your way to a final, there were 4 teams there, and you had to play each team once. If you won all 3 games, you were the champion. If you tied with somebody, then there was a playoff game. You had to play one another. So we played the first game. The first team I think we played was King's Collegiate, and which was a boys' school, and they had pretty nice uniforms. I'll remember. But we didn't have too much trouble with them. It was
84 to 56. You handled them pretty easily.
Yeah. We beat them by 26 or 27 points or whatever. And similar with the Tatamagouche. When Tatamagouche, they had not a very strong team either, and we were able to beat them pretty good. I think another 26 or 27 points. And then our last game was with Lockport, and if Lockport beat us, then we were going to have to play them again in a sudden death game. But we had no trouble with Lockport for the first 3/4 of the game till probably the end of the third quarter. And I had managed to make it to halftime without getting any fouls.
Oh, interesting.
But by the start of the fourth quarter, I was fouled out.
Oh, you got fouled out of that
I
game?
got fouled out. Now remember, I had no fouls at halftime, and the start of the third quarter, I was fouled out. And right after I got fouled out, Donnie MacAulay got fouled out. Well, there's two of our main players, with being myself and Donnie, who were fouled out. And
Oh, you guys were doing the bulk of the scoring,
well,
probably.
yes, yeah, us and Ronnie McGibbon,
Yes,
who, as I've said, has been an underrated guy. But when we got fouled out, I think Ronnie felt that he had to become the scorer and fill in for the lack of production that was now part of our team, because Donnie and I weren't there, and he just kept coming down the floor and firing up long shot, and didn't play the clock at all, and so this played right into Lockport's hands.
Because you guys had a 27-point lead
Yes.
after the third quarter.
Yeah, and they just come on like gangbusters, and I can still remember we're screaming at Ronnie to hold the ball, not to shoot.
Yeah.
He was a great shooter, Ronnie. I think Ronnie was the best shooter on the team.
Yeah, you had mentioned that he could really drill it, eh?
Yeah, Ronnie was a guy who could stand in the corner and just keep sinking.
Yeah.
What would today would be threes, but
Yeah.
in that day were only twos.
But he wasn't managing the clock.
No, he wasn't managing, and that was the first time. In fairness, it was the first time that he'd been in that situation.
Yes.
That myself and Donnie MacAulay,
Yeah.
who basically controlled the play,
Yeah.
were fouled out. So
Yeah.
he took it on, and he took on a little too much.
So
but anyway, that's how they got back. And of course, in fairness to them, they got hot. They went through. I don't think they missed anything in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, but it sounds to me like you ended up winning, holding on 67,
Yeah.
62,
Yeah, we
which,
did.
which
Yeah.
is fine. You
Yeah, we
still got the job done, but it
Yeah.
sounds to me like they're, I'm not going to say home cooking, but I guess I just said it. Like
No,
they
well,
you know what I
if
mean?
Donnie and I had not been fouled out,
No,
it would have
no.
been an entirely different score.
For sure. And so who was refereeing that game?
A guy by the name of Danny Seaman, who was
Danny
well
Seaman.
known down in the valley. And I talked to Danny when the game was over, and I said, Danny, I had no fouls at halftime, and by the time we started the third quarter, you had fouled me out. How do you explain that? Well, Dave, he said, I could see the guys from Lockport going up for a shot, and he said, I couldn't see what you were doing, but I could tell by the contortions they were going through that you had to be doing something, so I had to call a foul for it.
Danny, that's interesting. So it might be along my lines before. Well, I just mentioned about the home cooking, but Danny was one of the best athletes ever to come out of this province.
Yeah.
Could have been a pro ball player. He was a star in the H&D league,
That's
in the
right.
baseball
Yeah.
league.
Yeah.
And he refereed a lot.
He did.
Yeah, and he was, he refereed when I was playing at St. FX. He probably refereed when you were playing at
He
Dell.
did, yeah, he did.
Yeah, so I hope he was better to you
I
in your
think he was.
university
He
career.
never. Danny was great. He was a character.
Yeah, he was.
And he was great. And
Yeah.
but that was his response when I was pretty happy that because I usually walk the line with fouls.
Yeah.
And to get through to halftime without any fouls, I thought, well, we're home free here now.
Yeah, you had a few to waste, right?
Yeah.
You didn't think you had.
No,
you were going to
but
continue for 5.
First thing I knew, I was fouled out, and then Donnie right behind me.
So you know what's really remarkable about that year? The girls' team won too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I can just imagine this. They played at Mount Carmel,
Yes.
and they beat Shelburne by 1 point. And then as you guys arrived back for their championship game.
When we got home, we got home in time from Lockport to see the championship game. They were playing. Who were they playing?
Shelburne. They beat them by 1 point.
Shelburne. They were playing. I think it was a playoff. They had to play Shelburne in a playoff.
Oh, okay, round robin that evolved into a playoff.
Yeah, evolved in a playoff between Central and Shelburne, and Central won by 1 point.
1 point, and the members of that team were June Penny, Norma Sellers, Gloria McGibbon, Josie Gainey, Mabel Quarterman, Marilyn Cook, Marg Johnson, Mary Woolley, Lolly McGinnis, Norma McSween from Mount Carmel,
yes,
transfer, and Brenda McPherson, transfer from St. Agnes.
St. Agnes.
Now, what really, when I heard about this and I was researching some of this, and it brought back memories of what happens in town, is when the girls won and you were there to watch them win. That must have been spectacular. But you guys all got on the fire engine together.
We did, because we had just gotten home. We didn't want to get on the fire engine. That was kind of common for anybody winning. That bring out the fire engine and give you a tour around town. Because we just basically got in town in time to see the girls play in the playoff game. And as soon as it was over and they won it, we all went out and piled on the girls and boys. It was quite something for, you know,
yes,
for
I guess so.
The same school to win the boys and girls championship.
Yeah, and then to be there at the same time.
At the same
to enjoy
time.
the same fire engine ride.
Not only was it the same teams from Central, it was the same night and on the same fire engine.
Yeah,
It wasn't two separate rides. We all. No. Anyway, it was fantastic.
And Waterford has a history. That was the tradition.
That was the tradition.
Yeah,
you won anything, you got to ride in the fire engine.
Okay, so Dave, probably the most famous team out of Central was the team that won the Canadian Juvenile title in 1960 to 61. And the members of that team were Donnie MacAulay, yourself, Ron McGibbon, Ralph Fisher, Harold Cook, George Hughes, Terry McGibbon, Al Cadden, Simon Chasson, pickup from Mount Carmel, and your coach was Red Bob.
Yes.
Now, Hector Roach was on your high school team that year, but because of an age difference, he's probably a couple of months too old.
He was too old to qualify for juvenile.
And you guys, really, if you're capable of winning the Canadian Juvenile title, I think you would have been capable of winning another provincial title, but the schedules conflicted. So I think Bob MacDonald entered you in Juvenile instead of headmasters.
Yes.
And you went on to play the St. Malachy's CYO in a classic Canadian Juvenile series, best of three in St. John.
Yes.
What do you remember about that?
In that year, in any year, the playoffs either went west or west came east, and that was a year when west came east, and so we basically just had to wait in this zone. Once we were the reps for this zone, we just had to wait here until we found out who we were going to be playing, and we were going to be playing it in St. John, New Brunswick, because we had neither the gym nor the school nor the money to be a host of any kind of a playoff series of that magnitude. So we knew we were going to St. John, and St. John, I think they beat Montreal, who had been the representative of the last remaining, if you will, of the West coming east. So we went to St. John. We drove up 2 cars, always.
Just 2 cars.
Just 2
everybody
cars.
Crammed in.
Yep. Victor Fisher took a bunch in his car, and Red Bob took the rest. And we landed in St. John, and there were a bunch of kids from St. Malachy's High School waiting for us to billet us in their homes. Yeah. And I remember seeing a write-up. There had been a write-up in the paper that day about the tournament and about our team coming up, and they seemed to know an awful lot about our team. And I got a kick because they referred at one point, they said, and they've got big Dave MacDonald, and of course I am not big, right? I mean, look at those hands. They're not exactly big, long arms. No, I don't have them, right?
Yeah.
So, but the thing that intrigued me was, how did they get that information? I mean, I was pretty naive. They obviously contacted somebody that from here who knew the team and could tell. They knew all about us.
Yeah.
Knew about Donnie MacAulay, and anyway, we got billeted, and the first game was on a Thursday night. So we played Thursday night, and we won the game 110-92.
Like that to me, 110 to 92 is totally amazing. After watching and looking at some of the high school scores.
Of earlier,
like
the 52,
50s and
53,
60s and 40s, right?
And don't forget, this was during an era when there was no three-point play.
No, so that game, like I can't attest to the defense, but the offense for both teams was prolific. It really was, eh?
Pretty well, all it was offense, of the 110 points, Donnie MacAulay and Ronnie McGibbon and myself all scored 35 points, which I think is a little amazing, and at the time indicative of the scoring power and who did the scoring on our team. Donnie MacAulay and myself would get all the accolades over the years, but Ronnie McGibbon was essential. I mean, Ronnie McGibbon could shoot, as I think I may have mentioned earlier. He was, in my opinion, the best shooter on the team.
Okay, he could drill it.
He could drill it, and his sweet spot was over in the corner, which nobody shoots from the corner. I mean, it's the toughest shot in basketball because there's no background.
No.
And anyway, Ronnie was great, but 35 points each for Donnie and Ronnie and myself.
So that's crazy.
That's
you
who
guys
scored.
scored 105 points collectively.
Yep.
And I just wonder who got the scraps.
I have no idea.
The other five, right?
It had to be. It was split between the rest of the team.
Yeah, but that's crazy. So. My God, they must have been shell-shocked, okay? Like
they were.
Dave Barry. I went on to play basketball at St. FX, and Dave Barry was a very successful collegiate basketball player.
Big man for St. FX.
Yeah, he was a big guy too, wasn't he?
I'd say he was 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
Maybe 6'6".
So he was prolific in that series.
He was our big one, and don't forget, Donnie MacAulay was our big guy. Donnie is maybe 6'1" and a bit. But George Hughes maybe had the best description of Donnie MacAulay. He said he played like a guy 6'6".
Yes.
Donnie always came to play. I mean, like who do I have to take on today? Yeah. Well, it's Dave Barry. He's 6'6". Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah. And I gave him a little help at one point in the game because. It was down. I never understood, Lowell. Is the basket I'm shooting at our basket, or is our basket the one we're protecting? I never could get that right. I mean, I never got confused about which way I was going.
No, I know. It's just the terminology, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I can answer that question.
There you go. Anyway, we went. Our team went down and scored or something. Or no, we didn't score. And the rebound came out, and Dave Barry went up for the rebound, and he'd been kind of killing us on the boards because he had so much of a height advantage. So when he went up with his arms raised, I've got the Waterford gene, right? So So I hauled off and drilled him right in the breadbasket, and never got caught, or I would have been kicked out, of course. And when the play came back down to our basket, and I look up at the other basket, and Dave Barry is still bent over. He's still bent. He's up there all by himself.
Might have been when you won the series, Dave.
Well, I mean, when we beat them, he came over to the bench and wanted a piece of me, right?
Okay.
And
so that's the first game.
That was the first.
And you guys really, you blew them out, really.
Yeah. So there was no love lost between Dave Barry and I, and we had some pretty good battles in college after that.
But, yes, and we'll talk about a few of them. A few of them later. One in particular. So how'd the next game go?
The next game, we somehow just seemed like we were playing in mud. We never really got unraveled, and we couldn't quite catch them. They went out to a bit of a lead, and we couldn't quite catch them. So they wound up winning by a pretty good score.
Yeah, 90-69. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so the final game, the three, it was the best two of the three. So the third game was set. That was Friday night. So the third game was set for Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
And there was no way we were going to lose that game. No, just no way.
Yeah.
So we took control early and
85-71. So
and Donnie MacAulay, he was superb in every game. I mean,
I think he had 89 points for the 3 games.
Yeah, he would have if he added up all the scores. I'm sure Donnie. And in the third game, Ronnie, I controlled the ball, and I would always take my share of shots, but if I thought I wasn't having a good game, well, I wouldn't keep forcing it.
And if somebody was hot.
Yeah, or if somebody was hot. And so I tried Ronnie to see what kind of a day he was having, and he starts sinking the man from, with his eyes closed from the corner and put a lot of points on the board for us. I think Ronnie was the difference that game.
Yeah, I never saw Ronnie play. I'm disappointed in that, and I never saw you play. And I never saw Richie Spears play. So there's a lot of guys I never saw play. Well, so I'm disappointed in that. So that's quite a feat when you think about it, eh? Canadian. You guys are the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame.
Yes. Yeah.
The Cape Breton Sports Hall of Fame.
Yes. Yeah.
And the New Waterford Sports Hall of Fame as a team.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean that's a remarkable team, and what a testament to.
It was very special, and I have to say that. I was 3 years behind Richie Spears at Central, so I was just kind of learning before Richie Spears left and went on to great things. And I was also 3 years ahead of George Hughes and Terry McGibbon.
Yes.
So, they were just sort of apprenticing and hadn't even gotten their growth spurt yet. And I've often said, had George Hughes been born a couple of years earlier, and he would have been an integral part of that 60-61 team. Lowell, I don't think anybody at the high school level would have touched us. I mean, I don't think. With George Hughes, with the rest of us.
With George Hughes in his prime.
With George Hughes in his prime.
Yeah. It was something
else. Because George had the whole game.
Oh yeah,
could shoot. It was tough.
We were talking about him quite a bit later, right? That's. I think it's a tremendous testament to a small school, tiny school, really, in a small town, with a significant basketball history, and it sort of puts a bow on the dynasty years. All the titles that you won. You won 4 in 6 years, and were in finals in 2, and over a 10-year period at the school won 6. Plus the Canadian Juvenile title. So I don't know. I'm not a historian, I'm not a sports historian, but you have to go back far to find out a team that dominated provincial high school sport in one particular sport that much in tiny Central High School.
Yeah, it was quite something really. And so Sunday we drove back from St. John to New Waterford, and when we got into Waterford, we got a ride on the fire engine.
Oh yeah, but that one was special. Canadian Championship, really. And you're young, and it's a bond for you guys forever, eh?
Oh
but
God,
that's crazy.
It's a bigger deal now because it's remembered. I mean, back then we were kind of like, well, it wasn't that we were blasé about it. I mean, we recognized that it was quite a feat, but that was part of our life then. Now it's looking back, wow, can you believe we did this?
It's funny how that is, eh? You don't really absorb it much when you're going through it, but as you get older, you just
It's looking back.
And whenever you meet somebody, the reminiscing goes on, right?
Yeah,
one of those
for sure.
guys. And when you think about it, you picked up Simon from Mount Carmel, and he had a scheduling issue. He had to play with Mount Carmel in the Valley.
I think Mount Carmel were the provincial. They were in the provincials
in the Valley, and he had to drive over and join you guys. So Hector couldn't play because of the age requirement.
Very
probably a few months. Yeah, very unfortunate. So of those 6 of that squad, if we included Hector, you had 6 guys that played university basketball.
That's right. Yeah.
6 guys that did very well on the university basketball. You played at Dell.
Yep.
Richie played at Acadia. George was at Dell. Simon played at Acadia. Hector played at UNB. And Donnie played at
Mount A.
Mount A. And there you go. Look at that.
Yeah,
from a small
that's right.
town,
From
and most of them from a small school, and it's amazing. So that was a special year.
That's right. Yeah. I never looked at it. That was six guys from that team went on to play university.
So that's a caliber of player, and that's why as you said, it would be nice to speculate George in his prime with that team.
Oh yeah, no, I can't imagine if it had George in his prime.
Yeah, you would. Yeah,
lights
amazing.
out.
Nothing compared to when we went to play for the Juvenile Championship. Because when we went to, the next year, Red Bob decided that we would not play high school in any headmaster stuff. We played in the senior league again all year, and were quite successful in that league. We ended up finishing second. Dave MacDonald, who was the captain of our team, won the scoring title that year. So instead of playing off in that league, Red Bob set up a schedule where we would play the Strands a couple of nights a week or practice with them or whatever. So from that, we got a lot of stuff from Carl Marsh, whatever. He gave us a lot of pointers, and of course the Strands toughened us up a bit. So it was worked out well. So when we went to St. John to play for the Canadian Championship, we played at St. John, I think the CYO Monarchs, I think they were called, and we were leading by 1 at halftime, I remember, and the game ended up, we won 110-92. I'm amazed when I think back to that, when we were winning by 44-22 and 55-41 all the time. But and Dave, I shouldn't be, well, I guess I can say that. Dave and I, we both had 35 points in that game. And the next game, we got a rude awakening. We got hammered 90-69 or whatever. So we were, then it's one game, so now we got to play a final game. And Red Bob was never much to teach, well, in my opinion, he was never much to teach us much about the game, but he gave us an opportunity to play. But all he did that day was to go hard to the basket and play defense for a change. So I think the game ended up 85-71 or something. We got to win the title that year. Well, Dave MacDonald was our natural born leader, whatever. He was a captain, and he was a good ball handler and playmaker, and kind of set an example for us. He was fast too, and Ronnie McGibbon was a smooth shooter. He had a great set shot. He could get himself open and get the ball, but he was also a very good defender, whatever. So he played really well on defense. And then I guess in the 3 games I scored 89 points, which was no 3-pointers in those days either. So you got to do a lot of work. But those guys were the primary guys to get the ball to me too. All I had to do was get myself open. And another major part was Ralph Fisher, the late Ralph Fisher, who was our other guard, and he moved the ball well. But he was also a great defender. People would have a tough time getting by him, sort of. Sometimes people would get banged up a little bit, but so I that would be the keep. Oh, sorry, and in that case, I would mention Simon Chesson, another late. And he had just come from playing in the headmasters with Mount Carmel, so Red Bob he was on our roster because he was a juvenile. All we were was a juvenile team per se. So, and Hector Roach was also able to play during the season with us, but then he was too old to be on the juvenile team. But they all played major roles in the regular season, along with George Hughes, and Terry McGibbon was another one, and Harold Cook. They all, and of course Red Bob was the leader, I guess. And then of course, as I mentioned, we got a lot of help from Carl Marsh in terms of being ready to go big time, I guess.
So in 1963-64, Central won another title, and you know that was the end of the Central titles. Of course, the school would have closed in 1970 when Breton Education Center opened and all three schools amalgamated.
Yes, yes.
But that team was led by George Hughes, Terry McGibbon, and
Jackie
Demeter. Boy, I watched them play as a grade 9, I guess, at Mount Carmel, and those guys could really play. The other players on the team besides George, Terry, and Jackie were Glenn McPhail, Carmen Pfeiffer, who I know quite well, Dave MacAulay, which would be Donnie's brother, Sandy Sharp, Jerry McIsaac, Jimmy Pasher, who was young. Of course, Roy was young too. It was the same old thing. They're bringing up younger guys to feed the system. I had a great talk with Terry McGibbon the other day. I was having trouble finding something on this team. I got his phone number from Reverend Duncan Roach, and I called him up, and he was more than willing to help me out. I found it really refreshing that he went downstairs, got his yearbook, and sent me copies of his yearbook, and so it was really good. Okay, that team they won the Cape Breton League, but they said they used the strands as you guys did.
Yes.
They used the strands for competition, and they did. So they went to the provincials, and they defeated Parisball 61-40, and then they had to go against who? Who do you think they played against?
Lockport.
Of course, it had to be Lockport, eh?
Right.
Lockport, okay, and they were against Lockport, and they had a 5-point lead at half. Lockport had the 5-point lead at half, and then they had a pep talk from Bob MacDonald. Now I find that, like I found Bob was Bob mild-mannered, or could he get excited?
He could get excited, but he tried to stay in control.
Yeah.
Even when he wasn't.
Okay.
And which wasn't very often, but
That's something I should have learned. Like, because I remember Bob refereeing when I was playing,
Yes,
right? And he
yeah.
coached at the academy when I was playing, and he was so mild-mannered, eh? But anyhow, he gave them a pep talk this day, and they came back and were up by 1 point in the third, and they beat them pretty good, 49-38. So that's the last Central banner, and it was a tremendous, because George, as George and Terry were both very good players, and so was Jackie. Jackie was a great athlete. Jackie played baseball too, good athlete. Yeah. And they went on from there, though, to play the QEH in the Juvenile. So they had one game up in Halifax, and they got beat pretty good, I think. So then they came down to Mount Carmel. I was in grade 9, and I watched that. And Durnford was leading the charge, the diminutive point guard that he was.
Yeah.
A guy by the name of Barry Shakespeare was in the post. I thought he was in the post. He's a big guy then. He's a great tennis player, right?
Yes.
And the joke at the day was, of all the guys sitting around, all the guys making jokes, they were saying, "Nice play, Shakespeare," and that was the line that was coming out. A pun on the writer Shakespeare, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's what that was. But that team brought up Colonel McClellan, which is a contemporary of mine.
Sure.
He was in grade 9, and he was a phenom. And
I've heard,
so they picked him up to play point as a grade 9. Can you imagine? Something like you would have been doing in your day, right?
That's great.
And Colonel played with that team. He later went on to be one of the best basketball players in the province. He left for a while to go to Alberta. But same old thing, eh? Juvenile was big.
Yeah.
And it happened usually after the season. You guys are just unfortunate that it happened to conflict with the...
that was too bad.
But like the Juvenile was a big thing. So that was the end of the Central
the era.
But it was.
Can I just say, Lowell, that you mentioned Terry McGibbon, a great guy. I know him, and he and George were two guys coming up learning their craft, if you will, on that Juvenile team. But Terry came from a big family, 9 kids.
Oh, really?
And I think 6 of them played basketball at Central.
Yeah.
And to the best of my memory, that whole family were like the heart and soul of Central School. So if there was one family that, there were 6 kids going there, and I think they were maybe all at the same time, and then the last 3 kids got raised basically in Ontario, but and Ronnie McGibbon, of course, is Terry's brother.
Yeah, he was the shooter.
He was the shooter. So anyway,
is he still alive?
Yes, yeah.
If I run into him, if I ever run into him, I'll know what to say to him, right?
He comes down now and again.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, you might.
Yeah, I never know. I might run into him. Yeah. He was hitting 3-point shots before there was a line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the line had been in, he'd been the lead scorer.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. He was taking most of the shots. Yeah, because back in the day, if you shot outside 15 foot, that was a long shot, right?
Yeah, and I used to take long shots because I watched Ruck do it. Learning from the guys, you know, Ruck would put this big one-handed set shot in from 50 feet or whatever
it's just
it was.
coming over half. Milcon was a bigger gym, probably 50,
and
45 foot to half.
I thought, I can do that. And I used to guard Ruck when we played the Strands, so we had pretty good.
Because he didn't go. Ruck dominated the defensive board.
He did.
And started the fast break for the Strands.
Exactly.
But he didn't go much past half on the offense.
The half. No,
he was directing traffic.
Yep.
And headman in the ball.
Exactly.
That's why I loved
getting back.
So I love playing with those guys.
Yeah.
Like it was amazing. They pass you the ball, and then he'd go back and do all the dirty work.
Exactly.
Pretty good gig, eh?
He knew the game for sure.
Well, Dave, we mentioned we've been talking about the Central dynasty, for lack of a better term, and you know, four of the main players at Central were yourself, Richie Spears, prior to you, George Hughes, and Donnie MacAulay, and the four of you guys had extensive basketball careers after leaving high school. You all played in the AUS, as it was called then, I think, and you all were primetime players in good programs. So I was just wondering what you could tell me about George as a player after he left high school, you know?
Sure. George went to Dalhousie after high school, and I had a certain amount to do with that because I introduced Al Yar to George. George was in Halifax, as a matter of fact. He was in hospital at the what was the name of the garden? Not the VG, the
Camp
other
Hill?
one, the infirmary.
Infirmary, yes.
Yeah, it's long gone now, but anyway, he was up there, and you know how back in that day that when kids wanted to ride somewhere and it was a lot of snow down, they'd hop on the back of a car. So George, wanting to get a ride home up to 12 Hill, hopped on the back of a car and hit a bare spot and wrenched his shoulder. So somehow or other he wound up at the infirmary in Halifax, and I heard that he was there, so I said, I'm going to go see him. Now this was a Sunday in February in 1964.
It's crazy because I grew up hopping cars. Everybody hopped cars.
Yeah, we all did it.
Yeah,
Everybody, but George was unfortunate enough to hit a bare spot. And I don't know what all the details, but he wound up in the infirmary in Halifax. And I went down to see him on a Sunday afternoon in February, and I phoned Al Yar, and I said, Al, I'm going down to see a kid who's going to Central now. I played basketball with him years ago, and I think he can play for you, and you should come and meet him. Okay, he said, I'll come over and pick you up and go down with you. And so we went down, and I introduced him to George. And I remember it was a Sunday in February, because when we were leaving, he said to me, are you going to watch the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show tonight?
Yes.
And I said, who are the Beatles?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So, you know, I didn't know, but
really?
I'm a jazz lover. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so he told me about them, and I did. But anyway, that was the introduction to George and Al Yar. And then when I finished my school term that year, I graduated in commerce. And when I was heading home, Al Yar drove me home and stayed at my place and went down and talked to George and his father and wound up recruiting George. But anyway, George had a great career at Dal, became a captain, lived the first year at least with Al Yar.
Okay.
George and Tommy Beattie.
Oh yes.
And Larry Archibald. They all lived together with George and his wife and 3 kids, little kids too.
But Al
at Al Yar's place. But George didn't take any time to fit in, George, and we played that year together. George was a great player, certainly one of the best players on the team. Great shooter, and a tough player. George, just hard to play against and liked to win. Great player.
I played with George at the senior level, and we'll talk about that later. And all the attributes that you're listing are 100%. Right? He had a scoring record for a time in the Blue Nose Classic. He had the most points in the single game. And you know the Blue Nose Classic you played in. It was a pretty good tournament.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was real. Yeah. Probably maybe even a little better than the university ball. Would it be? Maybe at certain years.
Certain years it certainly would have been. And
so he had a record there. He played on the Canadian national team for a summer.
Yes.
And he was the captain, as you were.
Yes.
And as Billy Burns was.
That's right.
So there was 3 guys from New Waterford that went on to star at Dal, and who all were captains.
Became captains.
That's quite a feat.
That is something, isn't it?
Billy was a very good player. Billy's a couple of years younger than me, and we played against each other when I was at St. FX, and I coached Billy in baseball, even though I was only a couple of years older than him. So Billy was a hard-nosed, tough, get-it-done player.
Great competitor.
Could really play.
Great competitor.
Along the lines of George a little bit, and you. So it's like whatever's in the water here. It certainly was good with Dal. They had a George Hughes night for George when he was there. I know Al Yara recruited me and was in my living room, was showing me and my parents I don't know what it was, 16 millimeter, this big reels of film, and he was was showing the flicks from the George Hughes night. Yeah, and so it was. So George was also one of the best athletes, pure athletes to ever come out of town. Like there was nothing George couldn't play.
No,
he was a outstanding baseball player.
Yes.
He was on the provincial team, which went with Eddie Gillis coaching. He was recruited at the national tournament by St. Louis as a second baseman. He played on championship teams in '65 with Mike Roberts and Carl Marsh. They won they won the Maritime Championship. And for me, the barometer for George's athletic ability was when he went, and I was in Halifax at the time going to summer school. He went and played, I think it was Keith's, in the mainland fastball league. And George, in his rookie season, having not played mostly baseball, no fastball, he won the batting title in that league. Lyle Carter won it 10 years in a row, and Lyle Carter's a professional athlete, a goaltender, and he won it 10 years in a row. George walks in his first year and wins the batting title. So that, it's bizarre how athletic he was and how competitive he was. Like I've never seen anybody more competitive than George, physical and competitive. And I can just imagine, I wish I could have seen him at Dal.
Great player.
Yeah, great player.
I mean, you're right. It speaks to his athletic ability, and I was lucky to play with George, and we had a good team that year. I think we came second in the AUA. Was it AUA?
Yeah, AUA, AUS.
Whatever it was at that. Changed. Whatever it was at that time. Acadia with Richie came first, and we came second.
Yeah. Like I saw Larry Archibald play. He was Grease Lightning.
Yeah.
I saw him play in high school. I wish I could have seen him play at your level when you were playing. And I heard so much about Kevin White and Tom Beattie.
Yes.
And Dalhousie were on their way to being a power, and they had that tragic accident around Christmas time when both these young players lost their lives.
Kevin White and Tom.
Yeah,
Tom
they
Beattie.
Lost their lives in a car accident.
And 2 young ladies.
Yeah, it was 2 young ladies with them.
Yes.
Yeah, and so like Lord Almighty, Al Yar had finally built a powerhouse, and this tragic accident happened. But George doesn't talk much about it. But the odd time he did talk about it, I had to really pick him on it, right? But they were out, I think they were undefeated when these guys get killed in the car accident. So it was like it was too bad. But anyhow, George is ranks with one of the best athletes of all time here, and he certainly ranks with the best basketball. Now, what
from the mid 1960s to the mid 70s at Dalhousie University, we had 3 basketball players who were captains of the Dalhousie team. Now there's a small town with the majority. I think the largest it's ever been was 10,000. But there were three of us: Dave MacDonald, then myself, and then Billy Burns. All became captains of the Dow basketball team, which is quite a feat for a small town anywhere. I came up in '64, '65, and I was recruited. Al Yar was the coach. Very, very good coach. Coached with the national team later on. And he came down to Waterford and recruited. I got to tell you this story because you're going to enjoy it. When he came down, Dave MacDonald was home, and so Dave came in with him and that sort of thing, and a couple of other coaches. And so my father took them into the parlor. Most of the time, we weren't allowed in the parlor because that was the cleanest room in the house and it was just for guests to come in. But we always knew that my father had some bottles of moonshine in there. So if he sent us to the store for Lime Ricky Pop, it meant people were coming over and they were going to be drinking moonshine. So that's what, and Al Yar still talks about that. He's 86 now, and I just had supper with him downtown. And he said, I still remember that moonshine. Oh man, I was sick for days. That was in '69, and that was in Hamilton, Ontario, McMaster University. So there were a number of us. John Cassidy was from Ottawa. He played with me at Dalhousie. So they put us in residence there, and he and I played with the national team and traveled in different places around Ontario and stuff. And the coach was an Australian. Oh, wow. Yeah, and he was the big phys ed guy at UBC, and he was the coach for that year. And he would bring teams in, and we'd play all over the place. So it was wonderful. Wow. Wonderful experience, and very talented. And I played a lot of basketball, but I didn't know that I could turn around and see four guys who were 7 foot or a little bit less, who were Canadians that were at the camp, but we're all playing in the States.
Well, now what about Donnie MacAulay?
Let me put it this way. I had the extreme good fortune of having Donnie MacAulay as a teammate for 4 years in high school. And Donnie MacAulay was a great player. Donnie MacAulay came to play every game, and I may have mentioned it earlier. Whatever was required of Donnie MacAulay as our big man, Donnie MacAulay rose to that occasion. He was a great scorer. He was a good shooter, and he could play vicious defense, and he liked to rebound, and he particularly liked going up against taller guys to rebound because it challenged him, right? And he was good. He liked to win. Yeah, came to play.
I had the privilege of playing with Donnie. First of all, watching him when I was in high school after he came back from Mount A. He was at Mount A 1 year, okay? Yeah. And when he was at Mount A, he had a pretty good team. They were all young, and he didn't go back after that, but he played with a couple of guys that were really good, a couple of years older than him, but just freshmen, and they went and lost in the Eastern Canadian Junior Championship in Montreal. Donnie was telling me they went up to play, and they lost the first game by 5 points, and so they thought they were going to be in a 2-game total point, but their coach told them that it wouldn't matter if they won because they didn't have enough money to go out west if they won, so they didn't put any effort into the second game. But that's a reality of the times,
well,
right?
Yes,
yeah. They didn't have enough money to go out west, so Donnie, enjoyed himself on that trip, and then he came back and played with the Strands, and I watched him play with Carl and Mike and John King and Bozo and those guys, and Simon played quite a bit with them too then. And they were, like as I said before in this video, they won 16 titles, 9 Nova Scotia and 7 Maritime, and Donnie was on, I would say, at least 50% of them, and he blocked a lot of shots in those days.
Yeah.
And shot blocking wasn't that big then, but he was able to block shots. And one of the things I noticed about Donnie, and I'm trying to teach to my grandson now, is Donnie was best on a loose ball going out of bounds, and I've seen him 100 times bang it off of somebody's legs, and like
And
I
let
think
it
he invented
rebound
that
out of
move.
bounds. So
Yeah, like it was.
so-
But you know, the thing that sticks out most about Donnie for me was the bank shot. He had there wasn't many guys taking bank shots, and he had the best bank shot that I saw in my life, and that includes my own playing time and afterwards. And he was banking the ball off a fan-shaped backboard.
Yeah, and he would do it while he was in the air going sideways. I mean, he'd be going that way at full speed,
Yeah.
and he'd throw it up off the bank.
Yeah,
off
full
the-
tilt.
Yeah, full
Yeah,
tilt.
like, what a knack.
He did several things I never ever saw anybody else do before I saw Donnie do them. And that was one thing that emphasized thing. And the other one was sweeping around behind the guy's back to take the ball off him when he was dribbling it. I didn't see anybody do that before Donnie MacAulay.
Funny, I got it in my notes.
Oh,
here.
have you?
Yeah, I
Was-
got it. That's perfect.
that
It's
was-
100% because I didn't see anybody do it either.
No.
Actually, coaches were teaching us not to do it,
Okay.
and now they're teaching you to do it.
Yeah.
Go like get at the dribbler from behind. Go.
Yes,
Don't
yeah,
give up
yeah.
on the dribbler, right?
No.
But
if he gets past his sweeper on the other side, and get him.
he
Yeah.
perfected that.
He did. He was the first guy I saw do that, and there was a couple of things like that Donnie. He was unique, and you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'd have to say that. Well, Richie was 3 years ahead of me, and George was 3 years behind me. Donnie MacAulay would be my favorite player that I ever played with.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
I had
for sure.
I had the good fortune to play with him for 4 years.
And he's a legend in Strand's history because of that big game on Easter Sunday, 1970. Dave Brown comes into town with, I think, Ronnie Cox, who was on the national team, was on that team. Ward White, who played at Acadia, was on that team. He's about 6'10". They came in to play the Strands, and I was 19 years old, I think, at the time, playing with the Strands. And we got into a dandy there. Nut Brown, who had been drafted by the New York Knicks, and who just previously, 2 years previous to that, 2 years in a row, I think, won the intercollegiate scoring race out of UMB. So he comes into town, and we're playing with him, and the game's going on. The first game's going on pretty good, and Nut Brown takes a drive to the basket and gets sandwiched by Ruck McNeil and Donnie MacAulay, totally flattened, blood all over the place. And I'm out on the court. Nut Brown gets up, wipes the blood from his face, dings two foul shots, and I said, "Oh my God, who is this guy?" Because we heard about him coming in, but until you see him in person. So he scored 41 or 42 points that game. They won by 1. So Carl, who had retired in December on that team and decided he was going to coach and help Marshall coach, decided for the second game that they would put George on Nut Brown and Philip Legier, who was a buddy of mine, played at Mount Carmel, played at St. FX, 6'1", well-built, strong, really played defense and rebound, even though he's undersized. They put both of those guys on Nut Brown. And the rest of us either played in a triangle or sloughed off and let other guys try to beat us. So it worked. Nut Brown scored 21 points. But the series was bizarre because there's 2-game total point. And it seemed like we were playing forever. Is this game ever going to end? We had a visible scoreboard, meaning that they put the score up by flipping the charts, but a little red Kodak timer was on the bench, so you couldn't see the time. There was no clock. And we were playing forever and ever and ever. Mick Chesson, red Mick Chesson, he was on the clock. So I think there might have been some home court advantage to that invisible clock, but all I know is that I think it was me that passed the ball to Donnie at the top of the key, and at this point we're down 3. And Donnie goes up and hits a jump shot at the top of the key, and as soon as he releases it, the horn went. So the ball went in, and he had to go to the foul line. So he went to the foul line. If he makes this shot, we tie the series. Okay, he has to make this shot for us to be. No, we were down by 2 for us to win by 1. So he goes to the foul line, and I'm lining up on the lane, and he goes boom, boom, dink, and I'm saying, oh my Lord, he didn't take 2 seconds to do 1, 2 dribbles, whoop, in the basket. I never saw a guy under pressure,
think about it.
tough under pressure,
Yeah.
totally crazy. So that game was we probably had the benefit of playing a few extra minutes until Red Mick figured that Donnie making this shot. And so we blew them out in overtime. We blew them out 10 to 5 in overtime. I think they just realized that they were done. They were playing in Waterford. They weren't going to get out. But Donnie MacAulay was sensational. I mean, what he didn't do in that series.
You had Simon there, you said, and yourself, and Donnie from the other ones, and Philip, and Russell from the older fellas, and Hughes was the younger guys with you, and Freddie Connors was a younger guy, and Mike was one of the older guys, and Johnny Gillis, and back playing, and Spikey, of course, and then Pasher and Mackenzie. But see, the core, you had yourself and Simon and MacAulay and Russell and Philip and Mike and Spikey.
George.
See, George there. That was the main guys, because see, that was the first year we had guys coming back with that had experience in that.
We needed every gun on hand because that was quite a team that we beat. The New Brunswick team.
Well, like I said, those guys were recruited by the principal there, to go teach there, right? Yeah, and to beat, well, just not Brown alone. I mean,
he was unbelievable. And for anybody that doesn't know, Nuck Brown he was drafted in the NBA.
That's right.
And he was hired to teach school at Petitcodiac. And I
That's
remember
right.
Carl.
Well, see, that principal took not only him, there was 4 or 5 of them that did.
Yeah, they had Ward White who played at Acadia.
Yeah.
I think they had a Cox guy that played on the national team.
Yeah.
And they had a couple other guys that I played against in university.
Yeah.
And anybody that doesn't know, Nuck Brown became probably one of the greatest coaches in the Atlantic University history after that. He started at UPEI and ended up being a legend at Acadia.
That's right.
Won many AUS titles. Now, going back to that 1970 series, like a lot of people said, it was probably the best basketball weekend in this town. And the scenario was that it was 2-game total point, and Nuck Brown scored 42 points in the first game, but they only beat us by 1, right?
That's right.
And the second game, you made the adjustment from a defensive perspective, and we held them to 21. Imagine holding them to 21. And we won, but Donnie MacAulay came up big around the end, didn't he?
Well, the first game, he hit a jump shot there.
Yeah, and then the
he
time
scored.
expired.
That's right, he scored a
And he had to make a foul shot.
That's right.
He made a foul shot, and then I think we blew them out in overtime.
That's right. Well, I think you had 6 or 8 points there in overtime there. That was a big thing there. We managed to beat them in the overtime, but that was, that was something else. What I showed you though, I mean, that team, and basketball, and our fellas, all you guys, that was, because I know, remember Martin McPherson was talking to me, and Martin said that it was greatest basketball he saw in the town.
Yeah, Martin would have seen, he would have a great basketball player himself and everything.
He played in the Strands, Plus he was on the original Cold Bowl too. Then.
Yeah, he's a tremendous man. I mean, he was one of the founding members of Cold Bowl. Had a lot to do with us getting.
Yeah, and I think if you interviewed a lot of people, a lot of them would say he's their favorite player just because of the way he was. He's a great guy and played
very modest too.
Yeah, played very special and
I'm only a youngster playing with him because when you're open, he passed he's a good passer. Pass you the ball.
No, he didn't mind sharing.
So that was the summer after we won the Canadian Championship. Before school ended, Stu Aberdeen, who was the coach at Acadia, who had been Richie's coach, came down and got Dave and I to middle of the day to scrimmage against each other, play one-on-one, and wanted us to come to Acadia, but there was no financial incentive at that time. So, and then Mike Hinchy, who was the town magistrate and the St. FX graduate, suggested that I could go to St. X, and he would make sure I got like a part-time job there, so to help supplement me. And the minister who had been at Calvin when I was in my development years, he had become the chaplain at Mount A. So he wanted to save a Protestant from going to the Catholic school. So he arranged for me to get a bursary to go to Mount A. So that enticed me to go there. And actually, I think there were 2 other members of our high school team were at Mount A. And we had a coach at Mount A, Gus No Fuss McFarlane, just a short, stocky little guy, who sometimes brought a bullwhip to practice, you know, and to snap at that would speed you up, whatever you do, work a little harder. And he was also the football coach, so some of his players played basketball too, but they were, for the most part, better football players than basketball players, because we had some rugged scrimmages there where they'd run right over you. But it was another good, that made me tougher, I think, or maybe more, I don't know, I shouldn't say mean, but more, it helped me in the later years with the strands when I was able to dish out some of the rough stuff, I guess, because it's always seemed to have a lot of tough teams or people, tough Halifax teams that would play us when we were with the strands, and we always had to be a little stronger than they were. We were quite successful with the strands for sure. And the 1970 team, of course, it was basically the same group of people that I'd been with for maybe 8 years or so, I guess. You know, Carl and Mike Roberts and Ruck McNeil and Spike McKinnon, Bozo Steele. But in the 1970s team, when we played Petticodiac in the finals, that was a 2-game total point series played on the same day. So they ended up beating us by 1 point in the first game, and then they went to Sydney where they went to get something to eat, and I think it was 3 hours later. I didn't find out till later. Lowell told me that Dave Nutbrown, who was the star player on that team, had a tough time convincing them to come back for the second game. It was another rough encounter, I guess, but they did come back, and the second game went back and forth, and I made a 2-pointer with seconds left and was fouled, so we knew then that I had to make this to tie the game and send it into OT, whatever. So I was on the line, right, and I probably had shot a couple of thousand foul shots that year just by myself in the gym sometimes. So I had all kinds of confidence. There's no way I'm missing this, whatever. And then they called time just when I was ready, and that's the first time I'd ever, what they call now, had to ice the shooter, I guess. But anyway, I shot it in, swished it in, and the game was tied. And then we beat them handily in the overtime. I think we won by 6 or 7 points. But that was the night when the beer really tasted good after the game. But and a sidebar to that was my brother-in-law, the late Mickey Chesson, was the timekeeper. He had played with us for a few years. And of course, in those days, there was no scoreboard or no clock, so everything was communicated verbally. The manager would hustle over, how much time left. So and that was fine for a while, but as the game progressed, and it was only maybe a minute or 2 left, when the manager asked him how much time was left, he said, "Frig off," right? And a couple of times he wouldn't tell the guy, and then he had to get the referee involved. So then they had to tell him how much time was left. But and I never really questioned Mickey about that, but I often thought like he was like that particular game. He might have been our 6th man, that maybe gave us enough time to win the game, whatever. But it was pretty exciting. That as I said, the beer really tasted good that day, because that was the gym was jam-packed with people and just crowded in there. There was hardly any room to maneuver or whatever, but because they're all on the sidelines too. So it was all in all, it was a pretty good experience for all those years. When I thought that was like the 15-year time span, I guess, where it was lots of fire engine rides. I recall a couple of times with some, I'm drifting off the topic here, I guess, but we'd play some teams, you know, touring teams like the Georgia Rebels and whatever, and we wouldn't always do the little tricks they wanted us to do, you know, stick the ball up in your shirt and that sort of stuff. But so more often than not, it'd be a hard-fought game. There'd be both teams would have a little blood on them at the end of the games, but they were they respected us anyway, and so we had a lot of fun. I was thinking about that the other day, and I'd forgotten about it in a sense, because so George and Richie, the three of us from, you know, a small school, were part of and the team was primarily from Dalhousie University, where Al Yer was the coach. But one thing that stands out is now I was talking to a little girl the other day whose sister went to the Canada Games recently in PEI, and they had all these fancy outfits, parkas and this and that. So what we had got was like a wine-colored blazer was what they gave us. Anyway, so it's outdoors in Quebec City, the opening ceremony, so we marched down there. And Lester Pearson is the Prime Minister, and he was giving a speech. He cut it short because it was minus 33 where we were, and with the wind chill, which wasn't even a word, I don't think, in those days, but it was minus 52. So everything was cut short. The opening ceremony was not the spectacular thing it is now. But and 2 days later, they had 75 centimeters of snow. So the staff, we were in the hotel where we were able to get to the gym, walk to go play, but the staff could not get there. So I remember Richie was kind of taking charge of the kitchen, whatever, so we were cooking eggs and doing everything, making breakfast for everybody and cereal and whatever. So we had access to all the amenities, I guess, from the kitchen. But and things went fairly well, and we ended up losing to Ontario in what would have been, we ended up winning the bronze medal, but we could have got to the final. And I can't remember the score of that game. It was close. I'm sure George or Richie might remember maybe. But.
So Dave, we're going to go into your career now. I mean, you're very prolific. You had a great high school career. You quarterbacked your team to, you know, basically four championships. Your younger years were just playing a role, but especially in your last couple of years with the team, and also you quarterbacked the Juvenile team to Canadian title. So you walked into Dalhousie, and I think you were recruited before you got to Dal, though, weren't you?
I was recruited by Stu Aberdeen at Acadia, and by Frank Baldwin at St. Mary's. Mm-hmm. But when it came time to actually make a decision, it worked out better financially and location-wise for me to go to Dal, because my brother lived in Halifax, and
you had a place to stay.
And I had a free room and board, and he was fairly close to the school, so it just made more sense there. So I didn't wind up going to Acadia.
At that point, were you considering law?
If you look at the yearbook, it'll say a future in commerce and law, which is what happened, but I can't really say that I was considering law at that time, because when I finished commerce, I spent a year out working in Montreal, and between Montreal and Halifax. And when I decided to go back, and I basically wanted to go back to play, but I had one more year of eligibility basketball, mm-hmm. And so I went into law. I was fortunate to get in.
So did you play 2 or 3 years at Dal?
2 years.
And then you played other years with the Halifax
I played
Schooners.
in the off years with the Halifax Schooners, and I would play with the Schooners when they were going for the title. And as I said earlier, it was when West would be coming east, which turned out to be 63 and 65. And, so that's when we won the title.
So they loaded up then, sort of thing.
Yeah. They did. That's a lot of good players you would know from the old days.
Yeah. So with the Schooners, you were would would that be Rod Shoveler? And,
Rod Shoveler, a guy by the name of Claude McLaughlin.
Yes.
Dick Loisel was in there. Ian McMillan, Dick Hayden.
Okay.
Dick Hayden was
Yeah,
there.
yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah, there was a guy, Bill White, who was
Acadia guy.
No, he might have been, but I think he spent some time at Dal too.
Okay.
And a guy, two St. Mary's guys, one by the name of Bill Mullane,
Yeah.
and another guy by the name of Brian Reed.
Okay.
Brian Reed, I think, he worked for Ford Motor Company.
Yeah.
And then there was a Nicky Weatherstone. I think he was a Navy guy. And let me see who else.
Was Shoveler with that crew? Did Shoveler play?
Shoveler, yeah. Shoveler was in there. Yeah.
Rod Shoveler, he's an institution in basketball,
Rod
especially
Shoveler.
as a referee, right?
Yeah. And there was a guy who worked with the CBC, whose name I can't remember. But he played with us one year.
So McLaughlin was the key to that organization, wasn't
McLaughlin was, you know how every organization needs a key guy to take care of all the logistics and everything else. That was Claude McLaughlin. But he was also a good player. And one year we won the Canadian title. We pulled the Stu Aberdeen routine, whereas we focused the offense around one guy, and that one guy was Claude McLaughlin.
Ah.
And he didn't disappoint either.
No?
Really. He was great.
A lot of pressure on him.
A lot of pressure on him, yeah. And the team was coached by Bobby Douglas.
Oh my God, legendary Bobby Douglas.
The legendary Bobby Douglas, who you would know. And he was probably coaching Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, like he's an institution basketball-wise. Yeah, tremendous coach. So Dave, you were a starting point guard with that team?
Yeah. Yes, I did. Yeah, started with. I was a starting guard with the Schooners both years, and the Dal Tigers both years.
So in Dal, you were like as a fledge. Al was just trying to get the program going then, right? It was
when I first went to Dal, first played. They hadn't won a league game in 5 years.
Oh my God!
And the guy, there was a guy there. I think his name was Don Nelson. He was basically the football coach, but in those years, the football coach who got hired by the athletic department to coach football would wind up coaching basketball.
Okay.
And I'm afraid Don Nelson didn't know much about basketball.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't know about the Central High Juvenile team. He didn't know where New Waterford was.
Yes. Yeah.
He probably didn't even know who Richie Spears was.
Maybe not.
But Richie was setting records down at Acadia.
Yes.
But anyway, so it was a different kind of team, different format, different. And
so you played for him for 1 year?
I didn't play for him at all. No.
Oh, okay, you didn't play.
No, I didn't.
You weren't there. Were you there then?
I was there that year.
You played
but
with the Schooners.
I wound up playing for the Schooners that year.
Yeah.
And playing with a guy who I'd say is the best basketball player I was ever on the floor with, a guy by the name of Warren Sutton.
Oh my God, he played with Richie at Acadia.
He did, and they found out midway through that year I'm talking about that he was ineligible. There was something that made him ineligible. So he came to the Schooners and played with us, and he and I were in the backcourt for the Schooners. He was a tremendous player.
So
I'd never seen anybody like him.
So he was a modern type, like athletic, jump out of the gym.
Modern, like athletic, one of those guys that would leave his feet at the top of the key and dunk the ball, sort of thing.
And could shoot it and everything.
And could shoot it.
How big was he?
He wasn't overly big. You know who reminded me of him is the Leonard guy who played for the Raptors.
Kawhi. Okay,
he
played that kind of a game.
He played that kind of a game, yeah.
I hear he
I had never seen before.
I hear he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you played with him. You guys.
Oh yeah, I got a picture
backcourt
somewhere of he and I out on the floor.
Yeah. So that's a great introduction to Halifax for you.
Oh, it was.
You were in with the right crowd.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And,
like some of those names are legendary. Dick Loisel was a professional athlete.
Yes.
Should have made Major League Baseball. tore his arm out in triple A, came to St. Mary's because he couldn't get a D1 scholarship because he was a professional athlete. So he told me himself personally, because he refereed when I played at St. FX, and I got to know him. I sat with him at one baseball tournament, senior in Dartmouth, and we had a good 2-hour conversation. And he came to St. Mary's to play football and basketball. And he was a star in the football team, and I think he was a star in the basketball team. And he's about as good an athlete as we've had in this province. So he was on your team. You played with him.
Yep.
And Sutton and those guys. Yeah, you were playing with some mega players.
Yeah, they were all stars. They'd all starred for somewhere, the university or. So the Navy guys, I'm not sure where they came from, but
Shoveler was a Navy guy.
Shoveler was a Navy guy. Yeah, good player too, tall.
Yeah, big, strong, aggressive
strong,
player.
Yeah.
So the second year you played with Al at Dal, did you?
Yeah. I played. It was my last year of eligibility. You had to get your college playing in a
4 years?
In 5, I think. I think it was 5, yeah. And I went back and played for Dal. I phoned Al Yar and I phoned Al Yar and said, I want to come back to Dal. I want to go to law school, but I said I can't get in. I was late applying. I said I can't get in because they told me that they've got 100 on the wait list. And there's no point me even sending the wait list hold money, $100 or something, whatever it was.
Significant money those days.
Yeah, because I'm never going to get in. So I'm phoning you, Al, to tell you I got a year's eligibility left.
Nice.
Do something. And he said, okay, well, I'll see what I can do. So he went to a prof he knew over at the law school, and the guy told him, it's impossible, he says. We got senators' sons and judges' sons trying to get in. They're on that wait list. It's impossible. I can't help you. I can't get them in. So I said, okay, Al, and I phoned my brother, Elmer in Halifax, who graduated from Dal Law School a number of years earlier. And I said, Elmer, I want to go to the law school, Dal Law School this year, but I'm having trouble getting in. Who do you know at the law school? Well, Dave, he says, I only know one guy over there at the law school, and it's the dean, Andy Mackay.
Oh, awesome.
The rest is history, of course.
Oh, that's awesome. So you had a great year that year, didn't you?
I had a great year.
That's the year you upset St. FX?
No, that was the year. That was my final year. George was on the team, and Larry, and we beat St. FX. I think the only team we didn't beat that year was Acadia.
So George was on that team, and Larry was on the team. Beatty's on the team?
Yeah.
Kevin White?
Yeah. Starting 5, George Beatty, Larry Archibald, Kevin White, Tom Beatty, myself. And when I came out, Eric Durnford would come in.
QEH legend.
QEH legend, yeah. Eric Durnford.
And a soon-to-be lawyer.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So my Lord Almighty.
Yeah.
So that probably the next year that Beatty and
it was, yeah.
So they were. So you can see where that team was coming, eh?
Oh God!
Yeah, you're right there when you were playing.
Yeah, and then Al had D team, I think, for quite a number of years after that.
So it was your first year actually playing with Dal that you put the screws to St. FX.
Yeah, it was. We didn't have much of a team, and we had a guy playing with us from here, a guy by the name of Miller McSween, Bud they called him.
Yeah, Miller McSween made a foul shot to get you guys to be down, I think, 1 point. So I think he made 2 foul shots. I think the game was 70. You won the game 73-72. Because I hear this story from Sweeney Hinchy a lot.
Okay.
Sweeney Hinchy never got over the fact that he was at law school and sitting in the stands when you led your Dal team, which was 0-6, against St. FX, was ranked 6. They were 6-0, ranked second in the country, and you guys beat them 73-72.
Yeah.
And from the clippings that I read, You were down 73 to 69, and he made 72 to 69, and he made 2 foul shots, setting the stage for you to. You got the ball. You guys got the ball back with 40 seconds down 1, and
no 3 point. No
3 pointers. You're down 1,
shots.
and so what I'm reading is that you guys got a turnover somehow, and then you nailed an outside shot with 3 or 4 seconds.
3 seconds left.
3 seconds?
Yeah, 3 seconds.
3 seconds on the clock, and you upset Packy and his charges. And the gym there had been Winter Carnival, and people were not that clued into the basketball, but they all came over, and so you had a packed house.
They had been at the hockey game.
Yeah.
The hockey stadium arena was next door. They'd been at the hockey game, and halftime they all landed in the gymnasium.
Yeah.
There was hardly anybody there till halftime then.
Yeah.
At halftime, the gymnasium was packed.
Yeah.
Which was great for us, we thought. And Al Yar gave a great halftime talk that game. I remember he came in, and I think we were winning 34-31 or something at halftime.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're up 3 at half.
Yeah, and he said, "Guys, you played great. You've had a great game so far. You're winning. You're beating the top team in the league. They were tied with Acadia.
Yep.
And he said, you can live on your laurels and say that's it, or he said you can go out and play the same in the second half and try to beat them." And of course, yeah. Well,
and you nailed the shot, and that was your 24th point.
was it?
Yeah,
Okay,
you scored 24 points in that game.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
I had a good game.
That was a game and a half.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, the point guard was mainly responsible to run the offense.
Yes, yeah.
And so you had to make sure you're getting everybody else shots too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and everybody had offenses that they ran, and that was number one. You run the offense.
Yeah.
And if you got the shot, then great.
So you.
But you just didn't go take a shot.
Yeah. Do you remember the shot?
Oh yeah.
Did you manufacture it, or did you? Part of the offense.
I remember it was up at sort of the side top of the key.
Yeah.
And somebody, I don't know if it was Miller McSween or I think it was Seaman, Jimmy Seaman.
Okay.
Jimmy Seaman. And Jimmy, he got sort of fixated. The time was running out. We were down by one point.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Seaman was in sort of the free throw area, pivoting.
He was stuck.
Pivoting. He was like in a trance, pivoting.
Yeah.
And I'm screaming at him to give me the ball.
Yeah.
And he finally spots me, because I think he didn't really know what he was going to do.
He was freezing up then.
He's freezing up, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he finally gets the message, and he passes me the ball. I immediately shoot it. I think the guy guarding me from X might have even got a fingertip on it, and it went
Bingo.
in bingo. We won. Well, the crowd, of course, filled the floor.
They stormed the floor?
They stormed the floor, and the refs had to get them all back off because
Because
there's 3 seconds left.
Yeah.
And so they get St. X take the ball, 3 seconds, and they get down. A futile shot didn't go in, and the place went mad. At the time, St. X and the Acadia were leading the league. They both had identical records, 6-0. And Acadia, I don't know who they were playing that night, but I remember we went back to Al Yar's after the game to celebrate.
I bet.
And we were listening to the radio report, sports news, and the guy come on and he said, "I have a score here from Dalhousie Gym tonight. It says, I'm just reading what's here. It says Dal beat St. X 73-72. It hasn't been confirmed, but
he didn't
believe it. He didn't, and I don't suppose anybody could believe it.
That was amazing. And Dave, they had a big night for you, Dave MacDonald night?
Yeah. And when it was my last year, and they knew I wouldn't be back, they had a Dave MacDonald night.
Yeah, so they had a George Hughes night?
And
later, and Dave MacDonald, you set the standard for the Waterford guys.
I set the trend, yeah.
And then you played some pretty good ball in Toronto.
I did, yeah. They had a sort of an industrial league up there, senior industrial league. And all kinds of teams were. I don't think you would ever get to play everybody who was registered.
Okay.
In the term of a season, there were so many teams, and some of them were tough, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, you know.
I think an all-star team in that league.
I was on the. I was on the second all-star team.
Yeah.
But a tough bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And our team was all Waterford guys, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was all McGibbons and.
Oh, really?
And
so like a reunion.
couple of guys from St. Agnes.
Must have been a good time after the game.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the best part of those when you start playing senior basketball, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. The
like,
camaraderie gets.
See, the other thing, Dave,
intense.
that a lot of people wouldn't realize, especially younger people, like you and Richie and George and Simon and Hector and Donnie were competing with the majority of those teams were loaded with Americans.
We're Americans, yeah.
St. FX started the story. St. Mary's were into it. Acadia was into it big time. Other programs were recruiting Americans with great resumes. And so you guys were competing as locals against those guys and doing very well. It's a real tip of the hat to you guys. I mean, it's to me as a sports guy looking at that was incredible. That you guys were what you were achieving. You were starring in a league where people were mostly the major teams in the league were recruiting out
in
of
the
country.
States. Well, that's right. Yeah.
And
that was the normal. You know,
that was the rule.
That was the rule. And you know, a lot of the other schools had American coaches too that had all the connection.
Exactly. And so that never changed until the 73-74 season. That's when that changed, and they changed it, and they first made it only 3 Americans, and then because of a court case, they had to change it to foreign trained players. 3. That's the rule as it exists today. You're only allowed to have 3
really?
foreign trained players on your team. Yeah, that rule changed in 73-74.
Oh, okay. I wasn't
you
aware
didn't know
of
that, eh?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
No. Yeah. That rule changed in 73-74.
Well, and some of the other teams back in that day they were all Americans.
Yeah,
they were
definitely.
You know, the starters and the bench, they were all Americans.
For sure. Yeah.
They might have had one.
So you and George were pioneers at Dal, and when Al started to change that, and then when you think of Larry Archibald from Truro, Kevin White from the island, Beattie from Bridgetown, he was ready to pull it off, right?
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
And
Durnford from Halifax, and we had a bunch of Halifax guys.
Yeah. Great. So now the next one would be there's so much information on would be Richie Spears, right? So you would have played against Richie.
Yes.
You would have watched him. You probably watched him a bit in high school. He was on one of your teams, wasn't he? You were a youngster on his team.
I was on the same team as Richie for 2 years, although I was younger.
Yeah. And then,
but I still got to see him and watch him.
And then you watched him at Acadia and played against him. And so
exactly.
So sum up Richie Spears for me.
Well, as players from the Waterford, Richie Spears, I would say, has to be considered one of the top basketball guys to ever come into this town. Basketball was his life and became his life, and he made sure of that by when I was in law school at Dal and Richie finished at Acadia, graduated with his degree, and he came to Dal to take a Master's of Economics, a 2-year program. After more than midway through the second year of the program, somewhere in February or something, he sought me out, and when he found me, he said, "I'm just coming to say goodbye." I said, "What do you mean goodbye?" And he said, "Well, I've decided that basketball is my life, and this economics degree doesn't mean anything. I'm always going to be involved with basketball. So I'm leaving. I'm going to go and play somewhere. I don't know where he was going, if it was Europe or." And I said to him, "Richie, you've got 2 months left before you graduate with the degree. You can hold on surely for 2 months and then you get the degree and do what you want, but you've got the degree.
Makes sense.
Yeah, to me it did, but Richie, basketball's my life. I've made up my mind. This is just a waste of time. I know it's only 2 months, but I'm never going to use it. I'm never going to need it. It's basketball. And that's how he spent his life, coaching and playing and teaching I think he said in his part of the video that he still goes every day into the gym and shoots the basketball. And he's what, 82 now?
Yeah, Richie's 82, and he shoots the basketball about 45 minutes to an hour.
Every day.
Every day that he's not traveling somewhere.
He probably has trouble walking there, but there's two things about Richie Spears. He could shoot better than everybody, and the reason he could was that's all he did. He took every opportunity to practice shooting, to the point where he used to break into all of the gyms and stuff like that. So he was a shooter. And when Stu Aberdeen picked him up and recruited him at Acadia, he was the shooter. Stu Aberdeen always worked his offense around one guy who was the designated shooter, and the offense would work till that guy got the ball and he took the shot. And that, in Richie's day, that was Richie Spears. After Richie, it was Steve Konchalski.
Yes.
But in Richie's day, it was Richie. Richie had, I don't know, must have been in the teen, he had records, AUAA.
He led the country in scoring.
Yeah.
In, I think it was 63, 64. And he was the MVP at the Nationals, which they lost to maybe Assumption College or Windsor.
Okay.
And I think it was 24 points a game he averaged that year, and that's a lot of points with no three-pointer. And they ran a ball control offense, right? Like, if they didn't get the shot right away, they'd run it again.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It was a
no time clocks back in those days.
No time clocks, no three-point shots.
No three-point shots.
And so at his first game at Aberdeen at Acadia, he scored 46 points in his introduction, and it was against Mount A, so he was off to a roll right off the bat, and then he just kept progressing, and he made the national team, and then he played a while with the national team. Of course, he got drafted by 100 by the St. Louis Hawks.
Right.
And then, because he wanted to stick with the national team, he didn't try out. And eventually, I think he went and played in Europe, in Belgium, right, somewhere, and he played some basketball there. But his career, like, I think you're right. I think his nickname was Mr. Automatic at Acadia.
It was, yeah, exactly.
And I think it evolves from he had this penchant for wanting to shoot. And I think that was the greatest part of his life was shooting the basketball.
Yes.
And I think he wanted to be the best shooter. You know how they said Ted Williams always wanted to be known as the best hitter that ever lived? Ted Williams said that all the time. I wanted to be known as the best hitter that ever lived. Well, I think Richie might have wanted to be known as the best basketball.
Yeah, you could be right. I mean, and he just loved to shoot, and still does, but loved to shoot.
Yeah.
Breaking into gyms, got in trouble too for, as Donnie MacAulay said, we didn't call it breaking in those days. We called it sneaking in.
Yes.
Which seemed to
lessen
seemed to lessen the impact of it. But the other thing Richie Spears had going for him was his level of competition. He was, for my money, nobody would compete like Richie Spears. He was all Mr. Competitor, Mr. Automatic, he'd play one-on-one, and I'm telling you, I don't care who it is, if Richie Spears is playing one-on-one, Richie was going to win. Just by pure...
So he had that drive and competitiveness.
He had that drive and competitiveness. I went up one time to Halifax. There was an elite camp going on up there, 100 kids from all over the province, and Richie was in charge of the camp. And I got invited up as an
speaker, lecturer,
as an assistant coach, and at the end of the whole camp, it was 3 days, I think, of full days in the basketball court. And at the end of the thing, with the final night, with 100 kids around, did the last scrimmage, and it was over, and the speeches were over and everything, and the 100 kids are all sitting around the floor. And one of the other assistant coaches was a guy by the name of Augie Jones. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
him.
I played at St. FX.
He played at St. FX. He was a kid.
Good player.
Good player, a kid from Halifax. He was one of the other assistant coaches. And at the end of the camp, as I said, when the kids are all sitting around on the floor, Richie, it got quiet, and Richie said, I'm challenging Augie Jones to a game of one-on-one to 12. Well, Augie Jones had no choice but to accept it, because there's 100 kids sitting around the floor waiting for his answer. So he had to take the challenge. At one point, Richie had him 9-0.
And Richie's a lot older then.
But Richie was in his mid-40s then, and Augie Jones was maybe 20, 22.
Yes,
or
in his
something.
prime.
He was in his prime. He was a big star at St. FX, as you say. I think the final score wound up to be like 12-1 or 12-2, only because Richie started to get tired. But while the one-on-one was on, there was no
contest.
No contest, no. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, I don't know if Richie would ever have lost a one-on-one. I wouldn't be surprised to find
I think
out
he
that
said.
he did.
I think he would be quoted as saying he never lost a game of horse.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
He, like he told me way back when, he went to, so he really got the bug at Central, and he went to 3 basketball camps, at Bob Cousy's basketball camp.
Right.
He got on the train as a 15, 16, and 17-year-old, and he had free tickets. His father was worked for the railway, and he went to 3 Bob Cousy's basketball camps. But he tells me, he talks about how Aberdeen came in. See, he went to the military. He got in the military for a little while.
Sure.
And then he got hooked up with the Tilsonburg guys that were playing basketball, and they were national
They're big names.
championship
Yeah,
senior.
they used to win world titles, I think.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
the-
And so they were all in Ontario, and Richie got hooked on with them, and they were kind of grooming them for their senior team. And then they decided they wanted to play on their junior team. So Richie said he couldn't do it because he was in the military. So he went and talked to the military guys, and they allowed him to leave. I don't know if he called it honorable discharge, or
Yeah,
they just let
must
him.
have been
They just
something.
let him go, and so he got hooked there. So he came down to Myra for the summer and was out on the Myra, and Aberdeen came into the Waterford looking for him. Couldn't find him, and got, like Aberdeen only could do, I guess, tracked him down to the Myra. So Aberdeen went out to visit Richie, and Richie said, I'm going to Waterloo. And so Aberdeen says, nah, come on, you got to come to Acadia. No, I'm going to Waterloo. He says, Richie, would you like to go to Camp All-America? So that was it. So
There you went to
he took him to Camp All-America, and that was up in the Catskills, and that's where all the U.S. college players and their coaches went, and they entertained. The basketball was the entertainment for the resort residents. So there's 3 or 4 different resorts up there, and so they would have all these American college players in, and they're working there, but they're playing in the evening. So Richie's one-on-one player was Jeff Mullins, who had a 10-year career in the NBA. Yeah. And Richie tells the story. Camp All-America is incidentally where Donald Trump went, and a lot of these affluent parents would drop their kids off for the summers. But Richie was getting that kind of competition, and it was coached by Claire B. You remember Claire B. was an institution in Long Island, New York, and he was an innovator of basketball. So Richie tells me the story of Aberdeen says, let's go get something to eat. So Richie was probably shooting baskets somewhere at Camp All-America, somewhere isolated in a gym where everybody else was in the pool. And so Richie was shooting baskets, and Aberdeen says, let's go, we're going to get something to eat. So he talks about sitting down in a restaurant, and they go into this small restaurant, and who's sitting at a table but Bob Knight and Tate Slock. Now, Tate Slock was an instructor at basketball school, and I was with Karl Marsh sent 17 of us to basketball camp when I was in grade 9. It turned my life around as far as basketball goes. And we were down with Aberdeen, and those guys, Richie wasn't there because he was away somewhere with the national team. And we even took 2 Protestants. We took Roy Hughes and Jimmy Pasher. So
Oh,
we all
right,
piled
yeah.
in the van. But anyway, we're down there, and Tate Slock is doing a lecture for us. He's lecturing, and we're running around the gym for 45 minutes while he's lecturing in the middle. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. So we're not, no, don't get me wrong, we're not sprinting around the gym, but we had to keep moving around this perimeter of Acadia Gym. And you know the old Acadia Gym, it was only
Yeah.
a small little gym.
Yeah.
But Tate Slock and Stu Aberdeen and Richie Spears and Bobby Knight are at the same table. And Tate Slock was the head coach at West Point, and Bobby Knight, the legendary Bobby Knight, was his assistant. And Tate Slock was complaining about the military had a 6'4" height limit, and how was he supposed to compete with everybody else at 6'4"? And Aberdeen looked him in the eye and said, "You should emphasize defense." So Richie still believes that Aberdeen had influence on Tate and the legendary Bobby Knight. So Richie was in that, milieu, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So like basketball was his life, and so after after his career was over, playing career was over, he got into coaching, and he set Dawson College up with a national title, and then he worked for Mission 76 in Montreal when they were trying to develop. This particular mission was ladies basketball, so he got really involved and coached Sylvia Sweeney and greats like that, and got involved in going to. He said money was no object, and they took the best kids out of Quebec that they could, and they gave them intensive basketball, not intensive French, but intensive basketball.
Yeah.
And Richie had all the connections. He also coached at Laurentian and came in here and lost to St. Mary's or Arcadia when Brian Heaney St. Mary's won that big game in the Metro Center in 1978, I think, 78, 79, when they had 10,000 people in the Metro Center. So Richie was in that tournament, but his team finished third, but he thinks he got home cooked by a few of the referees. But then he eventually ended up in San Diego State, and he was coaching in San Diego State, the women's team. He had them in the top 20, which was amazing. And he tells a story about recruiting Cheryl Miller, who was one of the best ladies basketball players of all time, who was the sister of Reggie Miller, a famous NBA player. Reggie was younger. Richie's in the driveway shooting baskets with Cheryl Miller, Sal Miller, who was his father, and young Reggie. And he's trying to recruit her. And he almost had her. He had the president of the university involved, and they were going to give Cheryl Miller some kind of a gig with PBS, because she wanted to go into communications, right? But they lost out to UCLA in the end. But it was Richie's life in basketball has been unbelievable.
The rest of our stories paled in connection with Richie's in terms of the basketball story. His leads the way, and his life in basketball is second to none. From anybody from this area.
Yeah, like I think.
I mean, even probably
provincially, we've never had he's like that. Yeah, basketball was his life.
Yeah.
And he lived it, and he did accomplish great things, right?
Yeah.
But
and he was true to it. I mean, to leave university 2 months away from his master's degree in economics and say, no, I'm not going to need it. My life is basketball, and to make that decision and to stick to it. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. He ran into some rough roads, but
I bet, yeah.
But he stuck with it and has had quite a life in basketball.
I was reading sport books and stuff, and trying to follow the game of basketball. Madison Square Garden was a program, came on once a week on television. When we got a television, I said, "We got to get a TV. Got to get a TV." Up till that time, we were walking around Plummer Avenue looking in the window. Had I known about remotes, I would have brought my remote. But anyway, so that was it. I knew about Bob Cousy, and I heard about Bob Cousy's camp. There was an article in Sport magazine, like a picture of his camp. So I wrote to Bob Cousy and didn't get an answer. I wrote another one, and I eventually got a form letter from his manager, who was a phys ed teacher at small New England school, St. Anselm's, I think it was. And so there was an application for the camp and everything. So that's what I did for 3 years. I got on the train because my father worked on a railroad, so I could drive free. So that was great. When I remember the first time I got to Boston after the trip, my first railway trip. I was 16, and we had to go from North Station. That's where the Boston Garden is. Okay, North Station to South Station to meet the camp group. We're getting on a bus going to Pittsfield, New Hampshire, and so I go outside and I'm in the movies now. Okay, taxi. The guy shows up, and I jump in a taxi, and I was very aware of the fact that the Canadian dollar was worth more than the American dollar, okay? So I'm staring at the meter from the back seat. I'm holding on to my my equipment bag, and I'm staring, and the driver was a guy, there was an undershirt, a hairy back, and he hated everybody and everything, so I was a little intimidated. So it came to 95 cents. So I gave him $1. I said, "Keep the change, driver." He turns with the nickel. He says, "You keep it, kid. You need it more than me." That's locked in my memory, that scene. It was like yesterday it happened. So we went to the camp. I did well at those camps, and I came back, and the speech thing was still a factor, and so I went to grade 11 and dropped out. I went to South Bar, where my family had a farm, McLennan's Dairies. I worked on that, stayed at my grandmother's place, put a hoop up on the hen house, and shot the ball. And then I met a guy named Harry Lewis, who was at the radar base. And he went to Sydney Academy, and I ran into him in Sydney, and he said, "You know, come on out." And that was great. I used that place a lot, as well as Calvin Hall and the gym at Central. Now, the high school teams that I played on also played in the YMCA in Sydney, and we're playing against men, and so we're a little overpowered, but it was nevertheless a challenge. So that's basically how I kind of got into it, and I left high school at the end of my second year in grade 11 and joined the Air Force. I went to the Air Force, went to basic training in St. Jean. Then I went to Clinton and played on a team with officers, mainly officers and NCOs. And that team, I met people there that were connected to basketball in Ontario. And they said that I should be going to McMaster or Western. And so I almost said, "No, I'm in the Air Force. You can get out." So I went to the education officer in the Air Force and told him my story. They want me to go and play at Western. And I said, I would really like to do it. He said, "Oh yeah, honorably released, you're fine." And so I went to Tillsonburg, Ontario, and tried out, played and practiced with the Pan American team. 1959, the Pan American Games were in Indianapolis. And the names of those players are legends in basketball in Canada in that era. Howie Triano, Jay's father, Fred Ingleson, John McKibben, George Stulak. These are all very well-known people. And so I'm hanging on to that team. And I think I might make it, but they brought in Ray Minot from Toronto, who was 6'10". 6'10" at that time was big. So they said, look, we can get you into Hamilton, and they would like to play. We would like to have you play there and maybe come back. So I went in and I played for Hamilton CYO. Protestant guy, non-religious guy was me, and Kyron D, a priest, Father Kyron D. Kennedy, was a guy who kind of mentored me. I got a place to live. I got a job in International Harvester, and I played all the time, every free moment there. So that was it. So I made a decision about Western. I will go. So I got home to New Waterford, and I packed a trunk. I had a trunk with my name on it. You carry stuff in trunks. And it had my name on it, University of Western Ontario. Stu Aberdeen comes in. I'm out on the Myra now with George Greger, one of my teammates. There was a dance at the YMCA. We went out to his cottage afterwards, and Aberdeen called my parents. They knew I wasn't going to come home, so I'm out there with George Greger, and so Aberdeen had a manager that was from Glace Bay. So let's explore the Myra and find out where Richie is. So a knock on the door, middle of the morning, bing, bing, bing. Stu Aberdeen. He's about that high, and so he said, "Would you like to play? I'd like to see you play." He said, "Okay, George and I will play one-on-one." So we went into Sydney and played at St. Andrew's Hall. We used to get in there pretty easy. In those days, you could walk into a gym and play. There was games going on, and that didn't end until the 9/11, I think. So that was good. So he said, "Well, come on over to the hotel and we'll talk." So he was at the Isle Royal Hotel, and I remember it because there was a piece of gum on a chair that I sat on. Okay. So anyway, he asked me about Acadia and everything. I said, "Look, I'm a little bit committed now," and I said, "I'm a little bit committed." So. But nevertheless, I am going to Western. So he then asked me, "What are you going to do in the summertime?" My answer was, "I'm going to run on the sandbar. I'm going to shoot the basketball at the radar base, and I'm going to get ready for next season." I said, "What are you doing, Mr. Aberdeen?" You didn't call him coach, just Mr. Aberdeen. The word coach was never, we never called Red Bob coach. It was all Mr. MacDonald. So he said, "I'm going to work at Camp All America," which was an all-sports camp up in the Catskill Mountains in Monticello. Okay, New York kids went up there, rich kids that liked sports. The parents brought them up there, and it was held. The camp was held at the New York Military Academy, which is a private school just up from West Point. New York Military Academy, by the way, produced one of the presidents of the United States. Donald Trump is a graduate. Donald Trump is a graduate of NYMA. As a matter of fact, I looked it up one time on the internet. Now I can't find it, but he's sitting there in the middle of the front row, bigger than everybody else, and this is a baseball team. They're all dressed up. This was their baseball team, and there was a lot of kids, not a lot, but a fair number of kids who went to NYMA in the winter and went to Camp All America in the summer. Okay, the parents, getting rid of them up there, but I thought possibly I could have coached Trump. But it didn't work out. Okay? So the years were different, So where am I now? We're at Camp All America. Now it gets better. In 1960-61, there was 59-60-61. There was a scandal in U.S. college basketball. The scandal involved players shaving points to satisfy the bettors who were beating the bookies on college basketball. New York Times, New York Daily News, all the papers published the point spreads, the predictable point spreads. And so the gamblers got to meet the players in the summertime up in the Catskills, not the camp, but the hotels, Clutchers, the Nevele, the Pines, all those luxury hotels up there, which were big at the time, had college students work at, and many of them were basketball players, and they played outdoors on courts to the amusement of the guests. And that's when the gamblers got in touch with the players. That's when they hooked onto them. They gave them use of a card, if, you know, some clothes or something. And then at the end of it, at the end of the summer, he said, "Look, kid, if you need some help during the year, give me a call." The idea is we'll give you some money to help you with your laundry. You got $17 for laundry a month. That was an NBA rule, believe it or not, NCAA rule. So he said, "We don't want you to lose the game for your school. Just don't beat the spread." Anyway, what happened? The bookies got tired of losing money to the gamblers, so they called in the FBI, and then it got serious. People went to prison on this, okay? Lawyers went to prison. Players got banned. Some people had other results, but it was a bad thing. NCAA jumps in and says, "All right, no more summer leagues, no more summer leagues." But they didn't say anything about camps. Claire B. was a legendary basketball coach out of New York, LIU. They had a scandal in their era too, in the 20s. Okay, now he's running the camp at New York Military Academy, and word gets out that players can come there and play and work in the camp. Good players. So we had guys from University of North Carolina, from Duke, from many of the small southern schools, the East Coast teams. There were players from NYU, St. John's, and Seton Hall. We had 35 players, all major college players there, and 2 guys from Nova Scotia, Peter Simmons and myself. And it was just that changed me a lot. That is where I really, learned to play. So the national team came after that. The national team, I joke about it. I was very, very pleased. The national team started when I was there. Not the Tilsonburg Livingstons or like the hockey, the Picton BC, or the Kitchener Waterloo Dutchmen, or the Allen Cup winners and stuff. No, these teams are getting beaten now. The Russians and the Czechs are beating them. So we got to do we have to do this right and get a team that is in being. So Father David Bauer was instrumental in this. He created the Bauer Plan for hockey. The hockey it worked out well, so they decided to do it in basketball. So they got players from here, there, and everywhere, and they had training camp, and that was the national team. So I went with them for 2 years to South America and Europe. And we lost in the '67 in Pan American Games. We lost to Argentina. That's where I got this finger. Fred Engelson did that, trying to knock the ball out of my hands from behind. which is a cheap defensive play, because if you can't stay in front of the dribbler, you're behind. This is like, so anyway, that's what happened. So now we're at the Pan American Games, and we don't qualify for the Olympics, the Mexico City Olympics. So, okay, Acadia was when we got there. Aberdeen was 8-8 his first year, 10-10 in his second year, and 23-3 in his third year. And that's when Warren Sutton, myself, Andy Kranick came in. And interesting, we started on the 25th of November, 1960. 25th of November, and we were arrogant. We didn't want to go through initiation and stuff like that. The first game was the 25th of November. It's a very this is a true story. Football the previous year, Mount A beat Acadia 100-3. You need to research all this. I'm sure you can find this stuff somewhere. 100-3. They came in to open their season, and they had won the year before. They were doing well. It was always X, but they were doing well. And they came in with a team that they had from last year, and all of them returnees, seniors and stuff. And to play Acadia at Acadia. The game was on the radio, going back on telephone lines to Sackville. The score was 121-47 for Acadia. And their coach, Gus McFarland, made a statement at the end of the game. At least we got more than 3. But this was like an impact. This floored everybody. And so we were very proud of that, and we kept working. And Aberdeen was very serious about this game, and we were very serious about this game. We practiced very, very hard. Sometimes the practices were harder than games. One game though stands out in my mind, and it was again in the hall. I almost had the name of the hall, St. Ninian's Hall, maybe in Antigonish. The hall there where they played. They didn't play in the gym with the track. So we were there playing against St. F.X. And a student announcer, as a matter of fact, he looked a little like you. He got on the thing and he announced a welcome to Jimmy Spears from the Waterfords, come to watch his son play. And there's my father up in the bleachers, miner type hat, and he was a railway engineer, and so he was dressed the part, and I was so moved and so proud of that. The song at the time, the fight song for X was "Sing Sons of False Defense Xavier, da 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 da." I did that in the huddle pre-game with Acadia University on my shirt, on my jersey. I'm singing that. I'm going out. Charlie Thomas is 6'10", he's taking a jump. I'm going out standing on the lane singing "Sons of all different." and I remember the ex-player Nissen, he's the guy from he lives up in Sioux Lookout now. He was looking at me, what the hell what are you talking about here? So that was it. But we had a great game, and so we won, and that was it. But anyway, I remember the fact that they announced that. That was a beautiful thing for him to do. He didn't have to do that, It was really, really a nice thing. So that was St. F.X. And it was consistent with the warm feelings I had about St. FX for a long, long time. Paul Davenport, Franny Shea, Bob Moran. Paul Davenport became a priest. Franny Shea, those three names I know. Those guys came down to New Waterford every Easter, every March break or Easter time, and did a clinic at Mount Carmel. And I love those uniforms. God, look at those uniforms. I mean, I follow this guy's guy, and a couple of years after them doing that, now I'm 17. Now they're going to invite me to play on the Cape Breton All-Stars. So now I'm playing against St. FX. I scored 4 or 6 points off the bench, and that was like Reed Harrison, the son of Carl Harrison. They claimed that it was a big move. You know, I was 3 for 3 from the floor, or 2 for 2 from the floor. I can't remember exactly, but I didn't miss. I hit the shots, and I hit 2 free throws as well. I think I had less than 10 points, but we're talking about a New York minute, you know, so it was really good. The game was long over by that time, but they put me in, you know, the extra beating the Cape Breton All-Stars. But I always wanted to go there. I thought that this is the place I want to be, because I admired the Americans. I admired their style. They wore loafers. They wore loafers with a pen with a penny in the loafer. And these are guys, and they had these great shirts, and they're well dressed, and I just totally was all into St. FX. St. Louis Hawks. It didn't really have an effect, because the guy that drafted me was a guy that worked with North Carolina and South Carolina and the Philadelphia 76ers. Bucky Freeman was his name. He worked for Frank MacQuarrie, who was the coach. And he came up to that camp that I talked about, not the first one where Lowell was there, but at another time, and we played there. The players were around there, so we played, and they said, we can get him drafted. So sure enough, it happened. But the national team happened too at the same time. And what was going on in those days, people trying to break the 4-minute mile, West Santee ran 4:00.6, 6/100th of a second. I think it's 100 a second. Didn't break it, but he got money, expense money, and he was banned. So you couldn't in those days receive money as a professional and play in the Olympics. And the Olympics was my goal. '68 Olympics was my goal. It didn't happen, but it was all about the national team going to the Olympics. And so didn't didn't go to camp. Yeah. One guy made the team of everybody that went to the tryout camp, Paul Silas. Paul Silas today is a big management guy in the NBA. So the draft happened, but the draft was no real factor. Everybody was pretty impressed with it. I took it as quite an honor to be of all the guys playing basketball. And one of the guys that was highly drafted for the same team was Jeff Mullins. Spent 12 years in the NBA. He was my one-on-one partner in those summers at New York Military Academy. Oh, that was great. I'll tell you what, we beat somebody, and I grabbed the Nova Scotia flag and ran around. Hughes and MacAulay might even remember that. I roomed with MacAulay at that time, Donnie MacAulay, He was the funniest guy. Of all of the younger guys growing up, I thought he was a funny guy. He's a very, very funny guy. I don't know if in his adult years he's as funny, but he was funny. He kept everybody laughing. I liked him a lot, Donnie MacAulay. And he turned out to be a decent player. He played at Mount A for a bit. Yeah, so it was good. It was good because that was a first. That was also a tryout for the national. The coach, the new national team coach, was there, and he picked some players. It was open, see. It was not an age group thing. It was the best players from Manitoba and the best players from BC and Ontario, and these guys were all national team quality players. Some of them. Yeah. So about half of the national team played in that tournament there in Quebec City. It was pretty good. It was cold as hell. The first coaching job I had, believe it or not, was wheelchair basketball. Halifax Schooners was a team I played on. It was in the Massachusetts Basketball Conference. We played teams from New England, sponsored by a guy named Sidney Olin. Sidney Olin is Olin Breweries. So the Schooners, we played there, and I got hurt. A dislocated toe, big, so I had to get that looked after. So I went into the rehab center on University Avenue, and they used wax treatment on it to heat it up and everything. So I got to know some of the people there. They asked me if I would coach their wheelchair team. I'll give it a shot. So we went to one night a week, I guess it was. We went to a gym, everybody in wheelchairs. They had one there for me too. I sat in. So I ran a zone defense, 1-2-2. You guys are over here. This is your area, and get back on defense. Doing all that thing, and we did layup drills and everything. I passed them the ball and stuff. So that I did that for a little while, but it was really good. But the thing healed, and I had to go back playing in the playoffs with the Schooners. So I gave up the job, but I got a guy to do it, Dick Loisel. Dick Loisel, is that a name you might know?
Yeah.
Dick Loisel. Yeah. He had a strong arm.
Yeah.
Loisel made a career out of this work with handicapped people. He was big internationally in conferences for activities, physical activities for handicapped people born that way or got that way with injuries or illness. It was a big, and even when he came, all right, before he left for Florida, he was in Halifax, and they had this big event, this 24-hour relay, and they had people in tents at St. Mary's. It was Loisel that started all that. It was just, individuals doing path-breaking work are a big part of our world, dive into it. So that was just look after that wheelchair team. But he started diving into this stuff. Yeah, went to a conference here, there, and everywhere. So now I'm in South Carolina. The phone rings. It's Steve Konchowski. He said, "There's a job open here." Now I was interested in getting a job coaching. I had one more year of eligibility because I played 4. The rest of the schools in Canada, I could have played another year, 5 years. It's everywhere it's 5 years now. So I'm in New York, and he calls and says there's a job opening. I'm in South Carolina. The New York's another story. So I go up there. I land at the airport. Athletic director picked me up. And he was a hockey guy, had a convertible. This is the winter time. It's cold as hell. Hockey guys like convertibles, okay? This guy went to Florida for graduate studies afterwards, okay? Anyway, he's the athletic director there, and he's driving me in. And I don't know I remember this so well, and how this happened, I don't know. You ever say something you did not know you said it, but it just came out? Well, I asked him, how's basketball in Montreal? He says it's not too big. He says just mind shop. We'll change that. We changed that. Definitely, yeah. And so the Dawson Blues won the national championship, and all of those guys, they're my best friends today. All those guys have done stuff in basketball after. Eddie Pomacala is a big name in Quebec basketball. Dave Thornhill, Bruce Groningen is a referee in charge of the referees in Montreal. I mean, they're out there. The guys doing so. So I did that. I also did Mission 76, Mission 76. It was a program from the Quebec government designed to place a number of athletes on the 76 Olympics that equals the Quebec percentage of Canada's population. In other words, 1/3 of the population of Canada are Quebecers, approximately. And they wanted to have 1/3 in 22 Olympic sports in Montreal in 76. So we created a program of player development. Money was no problem. Money was no problem. I mean, that I didn't handle it. Olga Rykak, my sister, I said, you take care of all that stuff. So we got players. We succeeded. We had put 4 national team players on the women's national team. Liz Silcott, Sylvia Sweeney, Nancy Knowlton, and Marie Roy. Liz, Nancy. Oh, Colleen Dufresne. There were 5, but only 4 made it. So that was really big. We went to the Pocono Mountains in the summertime. I had a player that I recruited when I was in South Carolina, that I recruited for Dawson, and he came up. Sloan Cathcart was his name, and he played with us. And he had been to Ed Rush's camp. Ed Rush was an NBA referee, and his wife Kathy was a coach at Immaculata College that won the first 3 national championships in the U.S. under the Association of Women of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. Okay, so women's basketball is now starting to take root. Billie Jean King is out there doing missionary work too, and Billie Jean King played one-on-one against another golfer. It was a big time, a male guy. Anyway, I can't remember who it is. So I played Liz Silcott one-on-one at halftime in a game in Montreal later. But Liz Silcott was a leading scorer in the Women's Pro League when it first started. Sylvia Sweeney was the MVP in the World Championship tournament in '88 in South Carolina. These players were really good quality players. So I was their coach, developing them. We would go to Kathy's camp, Ed and Kathy's camp, from Montreal. I hadn't met Ed Rush or Kathy Rush, but I got him on the phone and I said, "This is Richie Spears. I am the coach of the women's national team in Quebec." National team. And that excited me. Ka-ching, 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 money now. So we need competition and we need training, training facilities. Okay, you come to the camp. Our counselors from MacQuarrie are working the camp the whole summer. So now we're playing top quality U.S. competition with the kids that we got out of Quebec. Those players from the MacQuarrie who worked at camp are all became full-time coaches. Stanford University, Tora Vanderveer, I knew her when she was a babysitter for Ed Rush's and Kathy's kids. She's been there 20 years winning national championships. Same thing for Old Dominion, USC, Texas, Stanford, Tennessee, all those places that are women's basketball powerhouses over the years were players from the MacQuarrie College in Philadelphia. There has to be a book written about that. You know, I haven't touched base with Kathy for quite a while. I got her number, but I just haven't called for a while. But I'll catch up. Ed, I saw Ed in San Diego before the pandemic. He's out of it now. He finished refereeing. There was a time when all of the referees in the NBA were from one high school in Philadelphia. Wow. Yeah, I mean it's now it's a whole lot. It's another world. But there was a handful of guys right out of it's like the referees here from Windsor.
Do you get back to the Waterford much?
Haven't been back enough. You know, I'm feeling. I'm feeling a little bit that I want to go back this summer, you know. Life moved so fast, did so many different things, you know, Europe, San Diego. I went through a period skiing for about 6 years, learned to ski, became a ski instructor. Ross Quackenbush was the coach at Mount A, at St. Mary's. We were sitting, Mickey Fox and Quack and I was at Mickey's one time, and he was talking about skiing. And I said, oh, okay, he wants to come out and ski. All right. I hear a lot of guys, they talk. Everybody talks a good game, like, you know, fishermen. Okay? So, as it turns out, he flies out to Mammoth when I'm there. I'm in ski school. I got a day off to meet him. And so we went skiing. So I tell you what, ski down this run, I'll follow you. And I said, holy shit, this guy is great. As it turned out, he was in a training program in Ontario at a ski area north of Toronto. The training program produced kids that became known as the Crazy Canucks, winning international ski races and stuff. He was part of that. He was hanging on with that gang. So he was just a great skier. Yeah. So anyway, that kind of stuff takes me out of New Waterford, you know, just different things went on, you know. Yeah. Wow. When my mother was alive, I went back and slept on the couch in Nicholson Avenue and did a camp here, there, and everywhere. You know, Beck and, you know, Yogi was a good friend of mine, Yogi Muse, yeah, his son and everything, a decent player, and yeah, I knew all those guys did camps in New Waterford for New Waterford kids at Beck, and also did the college a few times, North Sydney too. That's about it. But did a lot of years doing that, you know, sleeping on the couch. I shoot the ball now every day. Not every day. I shoot in June. I'll be shooting I go in the gym and shoot the basketball. That's all I do. I had 4 hip operations. I walk well. I walk this town like crazy. Okay, I'm in great shape. That sounds like Trump. I'm in perfect shape. I'm in perfect shape. So there were 3 kids at one end of the gym. They might have been high school, my freshman kids. Hardly anybody around. So I'm just by myself. I shoot for an hour and come home, you know. So one of them yells, "Will you come down and play with us?" I said, "Come on up here to center court." So we have a little conference here. I said, "Look, I'm 82 years old. I'll be 83 next time. I'll just make sure that's out there. I'm 82. I had 4 hip operations, 3 Achilles tendon operations, and my surgeon pointed his finger at me and said, if you fall off your bicycle, we'll have a wheelchair for you." So I've got no inline skates. I've got no ice skates. I've got no skis. That hurts. I got no bicycle. I got shooting the basketball and walking. And the kids picked up on the 82. Oh, I got an uncle, my grandfather, my mother. So they started talking about all the people in their families that had who were aged, you know. So it turned out to be kind of a nice conversation. I said, "Thank you very much," and I walked away a couple of steps, and I said, "Oh, by the way, if I could play, I'd beat all 3 of you." So that got out. So now school gets out in June. Okay, I'm in there by myself shooting in June. Later on, the end of June, the kids start coming in and they start helping. And so I remember a group of them walked in, and the youngest of them all, the smallest one, walked up. "I want to shake your hands." So that's my world now, and I study the French language.
So where do you shoot around at?
In the gym at Acadia. Oh, yeah, there's always gaps, you know, at 11 to 1:30 or 9 to 10. I go over there and just shoot. Nothing big. I'm there 45 minutes to an hour. Just keep my hand in, because there'll be an occasional game of horse somewhere in the summertime, some driveway, somebody. I can't lose those. I can't lose those. No, I never lost I never lost a 3-point shooting contest in my life, and I'm not going to start now.